OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
Hello, very good morning to you. Welcome along this Monday morning. It's the first day of spring. However you are, wherever you are, we hope you're still alive and listening to us every morning on OTB AM. Owen, good morning to you. Spring is sprung. How is Kerry? A grand stretch and all that?
The grand stretch is actually stalled, I think, over the last little while. I'm not sure has anybody else noticed that it was looking good for the mid part of January, and then the last couple of weeks have just been an absolute drag. But as you're right, spring has sprung, and Wales is in the air, Six Nations is in the air. Everything is normal. Everything is fine. A
rubbish Welsh team that we have the opportunity to go and absolutely annihilate this weekend. It couldn't be any better. I mean, like, we're doing pressure rankings, it's a Six Nations pressure rankings, and a little birdie has told me Wales are so bad they haven't even been considered for this, despite the fact that their head coach seems to be under the most pressure of everything. But we've just got used to it. All of a sudden, Wales, after a decade of being a complete pain in our ass, are now rubbish.
Yeah, let me consult the pressure rankings here, just scrolling through them. No sign of Wales here as I scroll down through the list, which is incredible. Usually there is a lot of pressure on Wales because they happen to be good at rugby. I don't think we appreciated how average they had become this time last year, and we were all relatively surprised with the performance that Ireland put in against them in the Aviva Stadium in the Six Nations, and then they beat them in the Nations League as well later in the year, or the Nations Cup, I should say. That we've got used in the space of a year to actually beating them. The departure of Warren Gatland has been positive. Now, I will say this, that there's absolutely no chance of this blowing up in our faces, because, of course, that would never happen to us when we preview the first game of a Six Nations match and big up Ireland's opportunities as opposed to their lowly opposition. So we're definitely going to be okay here in saying that Wales are now bad at rugby.
I don't think any of those Welsh players will get in the Ireland team with the start right now.
The best thing about that was that we actually managed to walk Brian O'Driscoll down the garden path and say, you agree with us, don't you? Like, there's only about two of those Irish players or two of those English players who get into the Ireland team. And he was like, you know what? Yes. And emblazoned everywhere, Brian O'Driscoll says, two English players, maybe one English player will get into the Ireland team, and we all know what happened. And we as a rugby nation, we probably haven't recovered from that moment. That was the moment that we lost the World Cup.
I mean, certainly we never recovered. They annihilated us, completely ruined our self-confidence, and set us on the chronic path that we've been up to this point, where actually we are a rugby nation that has a little bit of pressure on our coaching ticket, and we'll get to that on the pressure rankings. But notwithstanding that, this Wales team, they're no England. They're absolutely nowhere near as good as that England team. And look, maybe, you know, the wounded animal might actually provide something of danger this weekend for Ireland, but I mean, no, come on. Surely by Sunday afternoon, 5 o'clock, we're sitting feet up going, well, that was pretty good. Ireland are good at rugby again.
They could be one of the new avenues we have into feeling our sense of national self-confidence once again. Usually Italy is our only guaranteed avenue into that, but maybe Wales are providing a new way for us to feel good about ourselves in the middle of February. Like, maybe Wales will be the ones laughing in 2.5 years' time. Maybe their short-term pain is going to lead to a World Cup semi-final, where apparently that's like a stage that you can't actually attain if you're an Irish rugby player at the moment. And maybe they're actually just going through this period of trying out a new style of play, getting hammered on a couple of occasions, and then come 2023, they will be the ones laughing at us. Alan Wynne-Jones will be even younger, and he'll be even better, and they'll have just, I don't know, frozen him or something for a couple of years, and Wayne Pivac will be laughing in the face of Andy Farrell. That's how this story ends. But this weekend, that is not going to happen. Not this weekend, Wayne. It is going to be Ireland's Day this Sunday.
Yeah, that's the plan. It is another team in red who we want to talk about as well this morning after a fairly convincing second half performance from Liverpool. It wasn't the moment of genius from Mo Salah for the way he traps the ball and just dinks it past the keeper. It was the high beam, the full beam smile and the giddiness of their manager in the aftermath of the game, who just could not contain himself. It was like he'd had some secret, and the secret was that he had accessed eternal life and endless wealth, and he just couldn't prevent himself from telling everybody that this was happening right now in front of us. It's like, wow, he is unbelievably happy after this. I mean, you know, if Mikel Antonio had scored that goal, what would have happened if he'd like not missed when it was 0-0, like, and it goes just past the post? What would? But it did. He did miss, and that didn't happen. And the sliding doors, and all of a sudden, he feels like his team are reborn, and he's signing 2 defenders, perhaps certainly 1, but potentially 2, and maybe even a third. We'll see. Certainly, they're in the market for defenders, and at the last moment. And sure, look, you know, why wait until the end? So I guess you can. But they're back. That's the point here. They are back.
Yeah, Jurgen Klopp's been kind of having a go at the slot machine for the last few weeks, and that hasn't just been falling perfectly for him. He's been getting close. And Mo Salah, people will talk about yesterday's performance as, I don't know, Mo Salah being back, for example, whereas actually the week previous, he scores twice against Manchester United, but they lose, and it's the FA Cup. It doesn't perhaps get the fanfare it deserves, his performance. Against Spurs on Thursday night, I thought that was a brilliant finish, and it was a tad unfair that that goal was ruled out, and it was still painted as maybe the Premier League drought going on for Mo Salah, and he completely blew that out of the water yesterday. Just an exceptional performance from him, and he's having a really good season. Like, the blip that he's now gone through definitely had enough concerns about it where you could say maybe this isn't his best season, but for the first maybe 12, 13 games up until and including that Palace 7-0 game, you could make a case that this was maybe Salah's best season for Liverpool. So if he gets back to that level, then Liverpool will put themselves right back into the frame. The problem is that we could be sitting here in 7 days' time and Manchester City could be 9 points clear at the top of the Premier League. I think if City get to 9 points, this thing is done. I think that if they manage to ride this Kevin De Bruyne injury out, win games 1-0 like they did on Saturday afternoon in very effective fashion, and manage to be 9 points clear when he comes back, I think this thing is done. Even though 2 weeks ago we were like, this is amazing, this is going to be crazy, there's 5 or 6 teams who can possibly win the Premier League, but City are just a little bit too good. During their blip, they've been managing to get results, unlike Manchester United, who are clearly experiencing one at the moment, and unlike Liverpool, who do look to be out of theirs.
Or Leicester, who, you know, you can't lose the way that Leicester lost at the weekend and continue to consider yourself title contenders. Now, look, as it stands, they're only 5 points off, but it's a massive 5 points when you're Leicester and Vardy's out and you just come off that defeat that they come off. Not a great weekend for some important Irish footballers. 2 in particular were getting a bit of crap from their managers. I don't know if it was crap, but certainly there was an exchange. Did the cameras pick this up? Could you hear this? I've only heard it. I've only seen it written down. But Robbie Brady and Sean Dyche were getting into it in the middle of the Burnley game.
Yeah, so this was around 70 minutes into the game yesterday. You had Chelsea beating Burnley. You had Callum Hudson-Odoi single-handedly torching Burnley Football Club. Turf Moor was crumbling as a result of Callum Hudson-Odoi's performance. And then the gravelly voice of Sean Dyche is picked up by a hot mic. Robbie, tune in. He shouted, and they have like this sentence in The Athletic saying, jabbing his temple with his finger. So you can see it here. Robbie, tune in. That was the Sean Dyche on the sideline yesterday as Callum Hudson-Odoi was torching him. Like, I feel a little bit of sympathy for Robbie Brady, because I think if you're a footballer or any individual in the world right now, you need to find somebody who looks at you the way Thomas Tuchel looks at Callum Hudson-Odoi. He loves this guy. This guy has also repaid him by being brilliant in his first 2 games under the new manager, and he was great at the end of Lampard as well. This guy's a bloody good opponent for any player, let alone if you're Robbie Brady, who struggled with a bit of form over the last couple of years. So you might give a free pass to him a little bit, and maybe it's a little bit of worry for Ireland. But the bigger worry, you have to say, is St Mirren against Celtic on Saturday afternoon. And it's becoming an all too familiar thing at the moment, where a video gets shared on Twitter of Shane Duffy having another calamity. And that's what happened on Saturday. Yeah,
so balls in the left wing. There's a nice little clipped kind of, not the type of ball that as a centre back you can come and meet, or you know, you can, I don't know, stay goal side of your man, but you can't turn your back on the ball, lose the flight of it, and then let the forward pick it with his left foot down and have a bit of time while you're running in the wrong direction, and he smashes it to the net, and then you smash the ball out of play because you're literally still going the wrong direction as the ball hits the net. And I'm pretty sure his manager was also screaming at him at one point as well. And so, look, I don't know. I mean, Celtic got beaten by St Mirren and now are in danger of finishing 3rd in a 2-horse race. That'll be the first time they finished outside the top 2 since 94, 95. So that's not great. I don't know what's going to happen.
it's impossible to not feel a good degree of sympathy for Shane Duffy here. Obviously, his Celtic career has just been a complete disaster, and how he manages to get this back on track is going to be really interesting. He's still only 29 years of age. Like, this shouldn't be a sort of cliff for a player, especially a central defender still in his 20s. This should hopefully be a bit of a blip and a bit of a parking of his form, which is really good for a few years. How he gets that back on track now is going to be really interesting, because you would have thought that Celtic could be the sort of club where maybe you could avoid incident as a centre-back. Maybe you wouldn't be under as much pressure. Maybe you could play a few games without being forced into many errors. If he goes to a championship club now, which is clearly going to be his level, you're going to be under pressure in a lot of weeks unless you're playing with a very top club, and that could lead to more and more mistakes. It's going to be a really tricky thing for him to get this back on track. But right now, you have to say, going into the international window in what is it, a month away, over a month away at this point, you can't see him starting for Ireland. It's going to be very, very tough for him to get any minutes.
All right, OTB AM live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. Let's tell you what's coming up on the show between now and 10 o'clock. David Meyler is standing by. We're going to talk to him straight away. We'll bring you through the newspaper headlines. The World Cup of Pundits is coming your way at 8:15. Alan Quinlan will join us at 8:35. We've got our pressure rankings, no Wales. Brian Kerr, his reaction to the weekend at 9, and then Deal or No Deal with Phil as we head into the final hours of the transfer window, and then Sunday's pay-per-view coming your way from 9:30. And so that's what's coming up. We'd love to hear from you. 0879 180 180 is the phone number if you want to get in touch with us, or of course you can leave us a tweet at Off The Ball AM. Now, David Meyler, good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning, lads.
Liverpool are back.
I don't know. Well, they put in two fantastic performances in the last two games. They've got City in a week's time. I know they've got Brighton in between, but they're still 4 points behind, and City have a game in hand. So a lot of it's going to come down to that game against City. If they can beat Manchester City, then they're right back on track. But at the moment, it is all signs are positive. From yesterday to rest Sadio Mane and Roberto Firmino. Obviously brought him on late, but in the sense of that, and then they still get the result against the West Ham team. They're in good form, doing really well. So no, all signs are positive, and it looks good.
Klopp was unbelievably happy. He could not contain himself in the post-match interview on Sky last night. It was just like, I'm so happy, I need to calm down a little. But he couldn't help himself. He kept trying to, and then talking, and the smile got bigger and bigger. He obviously thinks they're back.
Yeah, of course. But look, he was asked after about, what has he changed, or what has changed in the last two games in the sense of the last probably 6 weeks. Nothing's probably changed. He did, talk about that they had a lot of conversations. They were talking to, try and resolve the problem. You almost felt it just didn't click in front of goal. And, obviously with the front three they have, you're kind of expecting them to turn on the performances, get the goals, get the assists for one another. It just hasn't happened. And then the last two games, it has seemed to kick into gear. I think the biggest thing for him yesterday would have been, obviously we know Fabinho's picked up another, a knock. Matip has picked up another one to play, Nate Phillips, who, I've been critical of. He was outstanding. I think that type of game suited him yesterday, that kind of physical encounter against, Antonio, certainly when Souček pushed on, twin balls in air, but to play him and Henderson in the centre half, and to dominate the game, they looked, relatively comfortable the entire game. All right, West Ham had a couple of half chances earlier on, but, they didn't look like they were going to get in, or, either one was going to make mistakes. And then, of course, when you rest Mane and Firmino and you bring in Origi, Shaqiri, etc., and they put in performances and you get the result, it's exactly what the manager would have wanted, because now, Mane, I know he has a slight injury, but he's been able to give him and Firmino kind of time to rest, but he's been able to pick up results. And I know they've got Brighton before City, but if they can turn over Brighton and going into the City, who are on an 8, I think it's 8 they've won in a row now, will be massive. And then that will be certainly the game that will say whether or not Liverpool are going to win this title.
David, it looked like the last couple of games, the Cup against Manchester United and against Spurs last Thursday, that Salah was starting to re-find his feet. There was this theory out there that maybe there was just going to be more opportunities for him against United and against Spurs. But I think last night was almost proof that he is back properly. So have you seen any evidence of a change by Klopp, or a change from Salah himself, to allow this uptick in form over the last couple of days?
No, I don't think Jurgen would have changed too much. Of course, going to the game, they did switch to a formation, kind of playing a diamond, trying to, like he spoke about, trying to get Origi more through the middle. Of course, look, there's no doubting Shaqiri is a wonderful footballer. He has an eye for a pass. He's a lovely left foot. And you speak about Salah. I think it's just confidence. You know, if you look at the first goal he got, in the sense that, you know, against United, he was probably trying that little wiggle and turn inside the box. And like Luke Shaw was man of the match, was outstanding. You know what I mean? He dealt with everything Salah threw at him. The sense of yesterday, it just showed you that if you do make one slight mistake, if you're not 100% on it as a defender, then Salah will punish you. And, you know, like that goal, of course, it's easy for everyone to say, you know, show him down the line, show him onto his right foot or whatever. But certainly with the type of player he is, when he's, you know, dodging, ducking, diving through, and he's manoeuvring the ball so well, if you do make any slight contact, he's going to hit the deck, especially with them being on penalties. And then, like, you talk about the second goal, that first touch with his right foot it's out of this world. It really highlights the fact that he is world class. And for someone who's been, you know, struggling for so long for confidence kind of in goals, he still is top scorer. And now with Vardy and Kane out as well, he could, like, if he was to pick up another 2-3 goals in the next 4 games, like, he's well clear of everyone else. And it just shows you that the fellow will score goals if he's given chances. And, you know, his confidence is right back up now. And going into that City game, it's massive.
It does seem to me that if Manchester City win that game next Sunday, that it could be curtains on the title race. I kind of have it at a 9-point gap, David. I'm not sure what you think, especially given how Manchester City performed on Saturday without De Bruyne. Being able to get those really effective 1-0 wins is something that they seem to have in their locker that not many other teams do.
No, definitely. Look, we spoke many times about City, and I've been on here and I've said I always fancied City to come good, and they do look it. If you go back to when they lost against Spurs, they now have won every game in between, which is just unheard of. The thing is, City are like a train. Of course, they're missing De Bruyne, who's the catalyst to everything good they do. They've managed to deal without Aguero, but if they can beat Liverpool, then I don't see, you know, anything else other than City winning the Premier League. So Liverpool need to be bang at it. But, you know, of course, if you were to probably listen to anyone, they'll probably say we've got Brighton first. We need to worry about them.
Can we go back to...
Sure.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask about the West Ham. That Salah goal that you're talking about, obviously the touch gets all of the credit. I went back and watched it again and again and again. It's about 12, 13 seconds from the ball being headed from the West Ham corner to being in the back of the net. It's that lightning quick, unbelievable. Like when you're watching the highlights, you're like, oh, they're going to score from a West Ham corner here. This is going to be pretty interesting. And then it's actually something that they were, over the last couple of seasons, it's that dynamism and it's that energy that we actually felt that maybe there'd been an impact from all the high press football over the last couple of seasons. So that isn't the case. They haven't lost energy.
No, definitely not. There's been many people have come out and said maybe it's burnout for like you said, the energy they've played with over the last few seasons. But certainly that goal highlighted, the way Liverpool want to play. Any time, they are defending a corner, you always think if they can get the first header. And it was Carlton Cole highlighted on Sky Sports last night. If you actually look at Yarmolenko, he's next to Salah, but it's that desire from Salah. And he gets across the halfway line, just as kind of Shaqiri's picking up the ball, and he actually holds his run. And Soufal then is caught in kind of no man's land, and it's like, boom, Salah goes. But from Trent's pass, to Shaqiri's pass, to Salah's touch, and then the finish, it's just, as you said, the only one you probably can't give credit to, and I refuse to give any credit, is Andy Robertson for his header, because I don't think he means to head it where he heads it. But at the same time, he wins his header, and then the passing is just, it's out of this world. It's just phenomenal goal. And I think somebody would probably correct me, but if you remember back to Salah's, I think it was Salah's first season, there was that great clip of a camera through the tunnel looking out. I think they were playing Arsenal. You can see Salah breaking. It was almost a flashback for me last night when he's taking off. And look, nobody could catch him. And then, the goal, look, it just speaks volumes for him, with the touch with the right foot to kill it stone dead at that pace. You look at the pass from Shaqiri, the height on it, it was windy, it was raining, and then boom, ball stone dead. And you just, at that moment, you just never expected him to miss.
Do you think Jordan Henderson's going to miss playing centre back now that they're looking to sign one or two players?
You know what? I won't say critical, but I've never wanted him to play centre half, and he's certainly surprised me. I was talking to him last night. He said, you're like a prime Baresi there, the way you're playing at the moment. And of course, there's been them comments from James Miller have come out that if you keep playing as well as you were, they might put you as a centre half. But it's just he's shown his experience and the way, his knowledge of the game to be able to slot in there, because it's all good and well playing against a good passing side when you're playing centre half. But for him to be able to deal with, players like Mikel Antonio, like who is strong, who is physical, who likes to, feel a defender, rustle him and turn him. They certainly dealt with, he's dealt with even Harry Kane, if you go back to the Spurs game, who's lauded as one of the best strikers in the world. He's dealt with two different variations of strikers to show that he is capable of playing there. So I have to give my apologies to him anyway.
It's interesting when you talk about the week that Liverpool now face, David, and there's almost a sense of 2 seasons ago of their approach to this week, that they know that they're chasing Manchester City at this point, but that's sort of the strength of the mentality around Liverpool going in as slight underdogs, assuming they get over Brighton in midweek this Sunday. That should be relatively exciting from a Liverpool standpoint, I'd imagine.
Yeah, of course. It's almost kind of the Brighton games in the way. You're kind of like, if Liverpool weren't to pick up the 3 points, then it would be the pressure mounting then for the City game would be totally different. We're kind of all looking forward to this, because as much as it was Liverpool United a few weeks ago as 1 and 2, now City, they're kind of going, well, hold on, guys, we're 3 points ahead of United, we're 4 points, and we've got a game in hand and everything. So Liverpool will be thinking, like, we have to beat them. And they will, like you're talking about the underdog title, that's what they've prided themselves on over the last few seasons. Everybody is, being able to talk about the fantastic football City of playing when they dominated. And then Liverpool have kind of come with this, the style in which Liverpool go with the high press and getting into your faces. You can imagine it'll be exactly that way against Brighton and against City, because they're going to have to take the game to Manchester City. And then without De Bruyne, without Aguero, there's probably no better chance for them to go and be able to, stamp their authority and take the game to them.
Can I just ask one last question about Liverpool before we move on? Again, Klopp afterwards was talking about how in the first half, the midfield in particular were on the wrong side of the ball, and he said that we were playing with 2 6s and we moved to play with 2 10s in the second half. Have they been changing around in-game that often? And it's just that we haven't really been talking about it too much, that actually Klopp has been making fairly significant in-game adjustments depending on what's been happening, but they haven't been coming off because they weren't scoring goals. I guess I'm asking, is he always that tactically effective?
I definitely think, sure, he is that tactically knowledgeable and he knows what he's doing. But in a sense, I think the big thing is he moved Thiago from the deep line one, to more advanced as kind of an 8. I know he spoke about a 10, but Thiago still comes deep, so I have to kind of, he's kind of playing a box-to-box midfielder because he does get forward, he is dropping deep. But it's the thing I probably talked about, and we've seen, I think the most interesting one I heard was Didi Hamann speak about it. But certainly with Gini gives you that more sense of stability and a sense of, the nitty-gritty. Thiago is a wonderful footballer, and now they're being able to get him further forward, which is actually benefiting Liverpool. So you have to give him credit for identifying that. Yes, they spoke about the 2 6s, but they almost played yesterday. Everything in the first half was kind of in front of, West Ham. No midfielder tried to kind of get beyond Shaqiri, and certainly with Origi looks to play to feed all the time. He doesn't look to stretch him behind. So for him, that's the beauty of managing, being able to identify those things. And even the small things you said, like a tactical change, like bringing off Milner, bring on Curtis Jones. We all saw Milner wasn't happy, but then he identifies why, the managers made this change, because Curtis Jones is the type of player who can pick a ball up and who can actually move with it and dribble with it. And that came from the opening goal. It was his ability to drive with the ball, pick it up, bring Liverpool 20, 30 yards off the pitch, and then, to play that intricate passing. I think it's where Wijnaldum comes back to him, then he gives it Salah, who gets the goal. But certainly there has been small tweaks and changes. I wouldn't say they've been massive. Liverpool have always been that kind of rigid 4-3-3. Certainly, why would you change anything, when you're fresh off winning the Premier League, the Champions League? But it's been able to identify those small things in games that matter. And him moving, Thiago from the 6 kind of more into the 8 and leaving him get more advanced, because look, the boy's an exceptionally gifted player, but at times you would question his defensive, defensive abilities, certainly his tackling anyway. He seems very rash. He's very quick to go to ground, and it can leave, you know, Liverpool exposed. But it's been a tactical, you know, stroke of genius really to push him that little bit further forward.
We can talk about the Liverpool versus Manchester City title race. I can already hear Manchester United fans screaming, saying they are 1 point ahead of Liverpool at the moment. The reaction to Saturday night's been interesting, David. Roy Keane and Jamie Carragher in Sky Sports' studio were saying that this was actually a worse result than the Sheffield United one, given the way they approached the game. What do you reckon?
I can look. You can see why they'd say it. Of course, you'd be bitterly disappointed with Sheffield United. It's very different when you play, a team who are fighting for their lives in a relegation scrap. Certainly with the Arsenal, when they're missing 3 of their best players, you know, with Saka, Tierney, and Aubameyang all out, you know, you're kind of looking, this is our opportunity. And you'd have to agree that I think any Manchester United fan, if they were honest, you know, who watched the game, they kind of, United players almost lack that belief in themselves to kind of go on. It's, you know, there has been, as you said, you know, certain things highlighted that they were at the top of the mountain, they were top, but it's almost they've got cold feet and they've got a little bit nervous. You know, and I think there's probably a lack of, you know, a champion mentality in that, you know, changing room, to go on to be the ones that say, like, we are number one now, everyone's coming for us, you know, to have that target in the back. Over the last, you know, couple of seasons, they've always been trying to hunt teams down. You know, they have the winning mentality because they've shown that, you know, getting late goals, you know, in certain games to go on and win it. But it was certainly disappointing in the way that they, you know, against Liverpool, they should have gone on and won that game. And then against Arsenal, you know, the chances they created, certainly someone like a Cavani, you've seen the impact he's had, that he's got to be scoring those. And it was kind of that sense of lack of that they can go and win the, you know, the Premier League. I think that's the biggest concern. But look, they'll bounce back. You know, do I think they'll win the Premier League? No, I don't. I still think, you know, Man City are the one in the driving seat. But you'd expect them to be up there.
Just to kind of challenge that a little bit, that idea that they didn't perhaps go for it as much as they could on Saturday night. When McTominay gets injured, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer brings on Anthony Martial. Like, there isn't many more substitutions he could have made at that point that could have been more offensive or more going forward from Solskjaer's perspective. There probably is an element of these attacking pieces just not being in full flowing mode at the moment, that maybe Solskjaer actually deserves a bit of credit for how he did change the game or try to affect the game after that injury.
No, definitely. But what I'm talking about is it's probably a lack from the players. Kind of, right. You know, there's only so much a manager can do. The manager's work is done during the week, and then once he picks the team, they cross the white line. They've got to go out and perform. Like Martial's form would be a concern for me, like in the sense that he's very hot or he's very cold. Obviously, we've seen the last few games, he hasn't been at the standard that we've seen him. If you look at once football came back at the end of last season, like, he was unstoppable. He needs to find a way to regain that form. But as you said, when McTominay goes off, he drops Pogba deep, he brings Martial and pushes him forward. You know, he showed the signs to the team that I want to go on and win this game. You know, they created enough chances, but there is a lack of belief in there that they can go and win the Premier League. And I think that inevitably will cost them.
That's okay, right? This year,
yeah.
if like, we didn't really anticipate Manchester United being good enough to be title contenders this year, and if they continue to build, then that would be a big leap forward. But next year, you would hope, if they get into this scenario, that actually they would have that belief because they've been around and they've backed themselves. It's like, I mean, it's hard to say Liverpool didn't have the belief to go and win it the first year that they ran City close, because City set up a record number of points and Liverpool were always behind, but it always looked like City were going to do it. They were unstoppable. It looked, you know, it's not quite a similar scenario, but Liverpool needed to build when Klopp arrived, and this is one of those United seasons where they're legitimately building. We can see players getting significantly better under the head coach, and we can see that there's been a plan in place, and they do have genuine quality in Bruno. So if I'm a Man United fan, I'm having a bit of patience and saying, okay, so let's drive this as far as we can this season. But if we don't win, it's not really that big a deal, is it?
Yeah, but if you're a United fan, you're used to winning. You know, you've won 13 Premier League titles. you're used to having that success. And of course, the last few years haven't been great under Mourinho, Van Gaal. Yeah, they've won different trophies here and there, but they've not been winning the Premier League, which is their bread and butter. That's the one that they're used to winning. I think at the start of the season, you'd have certainly said United would have felt that we want to be up there in the top 4 again, and we want to be, closing that gap between Liverpool and City. Liverpool and City this year at different times have had, bad runs, and United have found themselves in the driving seat. Yes, there has been talk about this next year's the big year where we really try and push on and win it. But they found themselves in a situation where they're first, and it's kind of like, yeah, we're only halfway through the season, but they found themselves in the driving seat and they found themselves there. It was almost as if they didn't believe that they had become, top of the table, that they could stay and maintain it. But that's the kind of disappointing thing in those big games against the other top 6 sides, that if you want to win the Premier League, you have to be beating them. Like I'm talking even now before Liverpool play Brighton, Liverpool have to beat Manchester City. It's no good them going and Jurgen taking on this defensive mindset and settling for 0-0 draw. Liverpool have to beat City. And at times, when Manchester United played, when they went to Liverpool, they needed to beat Liverpool. And then certainly when you look at, I think what's more frustrating with the Arsenal result is it's off the back of the Sheffield United one. If they had, turned that around and put in, a winning performance against Arsenal, you wouldn't be looking at the Sheffield United game. But that's the frustrating thing for them. It's kind of, to not score and, to miss the chances they did. It's kind of, that's where I kind of get that lack of belief in them. But at the same time, they can come back and, they will still put pressure on Liverpool and City. But I just feel at the moment, it's going to take them another while to be ready to win that Premier League title.
I just wanted to ask you about Thomas Tuchel's first week at Chelsea, David. This idea of a new manager bounce is interesting, especially from the perspective of the individual players. Someone like Ben Chilwell is not in his good books immediately. Someone like Marcus Alonso is in his good books immediately. What's that like when a new manager comes in and you realise that manager's made a very quick opinion about you as a player?
I wouldn't say he's made an opinion on Ben Chilwell after, a week. I know they played 2 games. He'll have a fair idea of what he wants. But at the same time, Ben Chilwell has played, kind of in a back 4 with Leicester, and then he's gone to Chelsea. It's kind of, Marcus Alonso plays differently in the sense that for some reason, he's always, in the last few years, certainly under Conte, that he was the one that, would be chipping in with goals and scoring a lot. But when a new manager comes in, if you're one of the manager's favourites, say, before he gets sacked, you do obviously wonder, will I be the same? Will I play as much? Obviously, there was big talk about Mason Mount being left out, Reece James. Of course, now Ben Chilwell has been left out. But then you look at it, Azpilicueta is back in. You've got Alonso who comes back and scores. For anyone who's not been in and around the squad under Frank, they get a clean slate, and it's up to them to improve and kind of hit the ground running. It is, if you're one of those lads who are out, it's a breath of fresh air, because you're kind of wondering, where's my Chelsea career going? And then all of a sudden a new manager comes in and he's looking and he's saying, like, look, it's a clean slate. I imagine there'll have been conversations with certain lads behind closed doors, kind of like, why weren't you playing? What was going on? And they'll have cleared the airs, and Thomas Tuchel's probably said, like, look, you've got a clean slate. And you look at like Marcus Alonso coming in, and certainly probably the biggest one has probably been Callum Hudson-Odoi. He's been, outstanding in the last 2 games. But then everyone has been quick to highlight, like, Reece James has been one of Chelsea's best players since the start of the season. And now he looks like he could be struggling to get into the team. That's what happens when a new manager comes in. He gives the place a lift, because everyone, feels it's a new slate, and everyone, like, you can guarantee the first 2-3 sessions would have been the best training sessions Chelsea have had in the last year, because it's a new manager and everyone's desperate to impress. Everyone's trying to make their mark on him, just so that he remembers it, that you're thinking, right, I've got a clean slate. And that's why fellas like Marcus Alonso are back in.
Just some very quick questions about the Ireland situation. Shane Duffy, again, look, people will have seen the highlights, gets caught out for a goal against St Mirren. Celtic now in danger of finishing 3rd in the league. It just hasn't worked out for him. What do you do if you're advising him at the moment, or what can he do to try and get his career back on track?
Do you know what? I was waiting to kind of join you, and I was listening. It is hard. I've played with Shane for a long time. I'm good friends with Shane. You know, to see him, he's struggling. No, there's no getting away from that. You know, he'd have grown up in Derry wanting to play for Celtic one day. Gets that opportunity. It's just not worked out. You know, they're obviously going for 10 in a row. His form, look, it's all over the place. It is tough. All you can advise him is, you know, keep your head down. Make sure everything you're doing off the field, you're doing it right. Everything, you know, make sure that your house is in order at home. Everything, and then you just gotta knuckle down and keep trying to work through it. I did see the goal, you know, where he gets caught. He turns his back. It is poor defending, to be honest. I can't get away from that. And it's just, that's kind of for Shane. It's kind of like that's his bread and butter. You know, that kind of stuff where you're dealing one-on-one, you're uptight against someone. But it just seems that he's massively struggling for confidence. And he's got to find a way to regain it. I don't know how he's going to do it, but you've got to just do everything when you go home. You've got to be right. You know, when you're in training, just go back to basics. Just go back to what got you to the level you're at. You know, because he's not a bad defender. He is going through a bad time, but he's not a bad defender, and he's going to be vital for Ireland. I know there's obviously with his form, there's going to be concerns about whether or not he'll play. But for me, he's got to find a way to find his form, because Ireland need him come these games. You know, the World Cup qualifiers are massive, and the importance of the first game, and Shane Duffy will be thereabouts, and we'll need him. So whatever you need to do, Shane, you need to do it, and you need to do it quick.
Patrick Bamford, obviously in good goal scoring form at the moment, is Irish qualified, but has said as recently as October that playing for England was his dream. Should we just give up on this at this point and forget about that and stop talking about him? Or do you make a, here, listen, come on. What do you do?
You know what, Gerard, the whole English, the lads who are English, you know, and they're kind of humming and hawing, it gets on my nerves. They either want to play for Ireland or they don't. Yes, Bamford would be a great addition to the Ireland squad, but I'm not hanging my hat on him. You know, it's almost disrespectful, in my opinion, to Irish footballers who kind of, you know, there's enough lads out there who be desperate and eager to play that you're kind of waiting to see whether or not he wants to play. He's come out and he said he wants to play for England. You know, I would make a phone call and say, do you want to play for Ireland, yes or no? And if it's a no, then good luck, goodbye. I wish you all the best in your career. I wouldn't be hanging my hat on it, you know. There's enough lads who are desperate. Like, for me, playing for Ireland is the biggest honour of your career, certainly the biggest honour of my career. I'm not going to be, I don't want fellas playing for my country who are going to be, you know, half-hearted or not committed. He's come out and he said that he's played for England, or he wants to play for England, sorry. You know, what? And then if that doesn't work out and you don't get in, that you can suddenly all of it, you know, say, oh, I'll go play for Ireland, and that's great. And it doesn't work like that, for me anyway. So I have a kind of a strong opinion. If he'd come out in the past and said, you know, I want to play, we've seen certainly with Declan, Jack Grealish, with those scenarios. I still get asked this day about Declan, what do I think about it? And I said, Declan made his decision, fair play to him, good luck. Goodbye, I wish you all the best. I'm friendly with Declan. No problem with that. He made his decision, go and do it. Go on and play with England. But it's just this whole thing of we don't want to be chasing fellas and looking over. You know, I think we need to take a bit more pride in ourselves that we, you know, of course, look, the goals have been a problem. But we can't be resting our hat on a lad whether or not he wants to play for Ireland. You know, I think we've got more about us than that. I
think you're dead right. David, good stuff. Thanks a million for joining us this morning. Cheers.
Thank you. Cheers.
David Meyler giving us some thoughts there. We'd love to hear from you too. 0879 180 180 is the mobile number. You can WhatsApp us on that. And if you want to, you can always leave a comment on the YouTube channel, or you can tweet us at Off the Ball AM. It's 9 minutes past 8 this morning. Really busy show between now and 10 o'clock still to come. We have a Deal or No Deal winter window special. It may well be the very last one. It is definitely the last one of this transfer window with Phil Egan coming up after 9. There's football with Brian Kerr, our Six Nations pressure rankings, and rugby with Alan Quinlan. We're back with the sports pages after these.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
The Saturday panel on OTB.
And I'm coming off the pitch. He said, Richard is on the phone. Richard? Yeah, he said, he's in Mexico. And then I'm totally bamboozled. I said, who the hell is Richard in Mexico? But it happened to be Richard Harris. But I got on the phone to him, and I swear to God, he's crying down the phone like. congratulating me and telling me how great it is. And he asked me, can I come to the final? And I said, of course you can.
Don't miss the panel every Saturday afternoon on OTB Sports Radio. Tune in 24/7 on the OTB Sports app.
Check out the Boyle Sports app today for details on which football match is getting the no-lose treatment this week. Plus, study the form with our Racing Post Spotlight before watching the action with free live streaming on all UK and Irish horse races. See the Boyle Sports app for full T's and C's. Boyle Sports. This is betting. Gamble responsibly. See gamblingcare.ie 18+.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
Yes, so very quickly running through the sports pages this morning. We'll start with OTBsports.com. Klopp addresses reports that Liverpool are in talks with Preston. So he actually, did he address the reports? I thought he was like, not going to talk about that, I'm going to talk about the, sure, we'll talk about that a little bit later. Team OTB recommends the TV shows, books and films to see you through lockdown. 25% of Irish children are falling off a cliff. How to save child fitness. That was the Niall Moyna conversation from during the week. Bielsa believes in Bamford and he is responding. That's Brian Kerr. We'll talk about that. Before we'll hear from that from Brian Kerr a little bit later on. And the finishing masterclass, Klopp hailed as unbelievable. That's essentially the front page picture on all the papers as well. So there's the same picture on the front of the Examiner and the same picture on the front of their different moments of it. The ball squirting past Fabianski. Celebrations with Henderson. Back page of Mojo back. So that's really what that is there. Blockheads. This is the row that's broken out between the PFA and Facebook, Twitter, and obviously Instagram is Facebook. Social media giants tell stars to block racists, but the PFA say it's not for the players to manage the racism that they receive. Maybe something is about to happen. Now would be a good time for all the players to band together and go on strike or something to force the social media companies to actually actively do something about the racists. Because now would be a good time to get on top of that. It seems as if there's a move against the racists around the world. You know, now's our moment. Liverpool will move for 2 defenders, and they're actually actively keeping an eye on Mustafi, who is surplus to requirements at the Emirates. Would this be, is Mustafi absolutely useless, Owen, or is Mustafi one of those players who leaves Arsenal and then suddenly becomes world class?
No, it's not great, Shkodran Mustafi. If you're an Everton fan, a Manchester United fan, a Manchester City fan, you want this move to happen. You want Shkodran Mustafi to be posing beside Jurgen Klopp, socially distanced, with his brand new Liverpool jersey in the coming days, because he will bring down everybody with him. Ben
Davis, 25, from Preston, is undergoing a medical today. That's because obviously the latest injury to Matip, they're not sure what the crack is with that. But there's also talks with Marseille about Duje Kaletakar. Did I get that right?
Nailed it.
Who's Croatian, who is 24, and I guess he's going to cost a little bit more because Marseille paid 17 million from Red Bull in 2018. So that's proper money, and he may well be one of those players who they end up signing and actually plays for the team for quite a long time. That's the same story in The Guardian there. The Lions are likely to turn down generous offer from Australia. So the Australian Open tennis are going to have 30,000 fans, and what are we, February? So by the time the summer rolls around, is it possible that loads more fans could actually be at the Lions games if the Lions were to play South Africa in Australia? I mean, it sounds a bit weird, but ultimately it might be better than the Lions playing in this part of the world behind closed doors. So it's all still up in the air at the moment, but they're definitely desperately trying to make the Lions happen this year, which I'm all in favour of.
Like, I know it's probably too late notice to actually change the team you're playing against, but it would make sense for a quick switcheroo to happen, for the South Africa thing to just be put on ice, and for Australia or the All Blacks to step up as your test opposition and to set up your midweek games. Logistically, that is a nightmare. It's never going to happen. Of course, it's not, but that would obviously make sense. The whole point of the Lions is home advantage. South Africa wouldn't have a home advantage in Australia. It would be better than nothing, obviously. And I think, to be fair, it's probably a better alternative than a Northern Hemisphere Lions tour.
Yeah, it's hard to know. Like, maybe South Africa in this part of the world would actually be great. All the South Africans living here would hopefully be vaccinated and able to go to the games. And I don't know, somehow it happening would be excellent at this point. The Irish Independent, their back page, they've two interesting stories. FAI red card to betting companies in search for new main sponsor. So they're saying that they've decided against partnering with a gambling company as their new primary sponsor. Obviously, 3 are no longer the sponsors. They don't have the shirt sponsor anymore, and it had been mooted before Christmas that Paddy Power and another gambling firm had also been indicated that they were keen in taking the main sponsorship, but that's now not going to happen. And Liam Griffin is backing calls for something to deal with hurling's growing cynicism, a black card, a sin bin, something like that. How do you fix it, right? Hurling has obviously completely changed as a sport from the 80s and 90s when it was win your own ball, man on man, 15 on 15. It has become a possession-based running game, incredibly high levels of skill from what Limerick are doing, but that cynicism is now just part of the game. What do you do to stop it?
Is it worth trying out a sin bin in hurling? I know it is sacrilege to suggest this, and I can actually hear people coming after me with their hurls or hurleys or whatever they call it. I'm sure there'll be another debate about that again this year, about this idea of a black card. Like, I've actually heard people say we can't have a black card, but we can have a sin bin, as if people don't realise that has actually changed. The black card is a sin bin nowadays in football, and it hasn't been bad. The change from the player going off for the duration of the match and being replaced, changing from that to a literal sin bin over the last couple of years, I think it's actually been much better for football. I don't see why it shouldn't be tried in hurling if you're going to constantly have some of the great hurling minds coming out and saying that the game is being ruined by cynicism. If you think the game is being ruined, you need to act. You can't just sit in your hands and just hope that things arrest itself, because you've said that it's actually become more cynical over the last couple of years. You're right, and it's going to continue on that trend over the next little while. The big question mark is, what do you do about cynical tackles late in the game? That has always been the really tricky one to solve. For the first 60 minutes of the game, first 55 minutes of the game at least, the sin bin, I think, works.
So penalty, an automatic penalty for anything that's deemed a cynical foul?
That's definitely one of the things that have been suggested, and if it's I know that in football it's been suggested that if there's a cynical foul in the opposition half, it'll be brought all the way up for a 21-yard free or something like that. But quite often in hurling, we're just not seeing that in hurling. So it is the attacking one. Maybe an automatic penalty would work. You're giving up what is in a lot of cases a guaranteed goal, and replacing it with a penalty. So I think it could be a bit of an eye for an eye, but the referees will just be under so much more pressure to try and determine what is actually cynical, what's not, which is of course what the issue is with the sin bin anyway.
Just on the front page of the Star, there's a story. It's not over till Kinahan is dead. Regency attackers hell-bent on revenge 5 years on. This is a Michael O'Toole story, and there's more inside. But obviously tonight, Panorama, BBC's investigative programme, is doing a feature on MTK. So that's obviously one of those big Irish sports stories that, I think a lot of Irish people are going to be interested in watching that tonight on Panorama on BBC. So what are we at? 18 minutes past 8 here this morning on OTB AM. We'd love to hear from you, as I said. 0879 180 180 is the number. It's the first week of February. This is the time of the year where the National Football League is usually kicking off, and you're making your annual schlep up to Clonus or Ballywafay or wherever it is, or Mayo if you're allowed back in after that incident the last time. But we've got a very different kind of league for you this morning, Owen. Instead of that,
we've got a World Cup, no less. We're bringing it at you this morning because we've been sitting at home watching football for what has seemed to have been just forever at this point. It's all we do now is watch football and watch people talk about football on television. And hopefully that's what people have been doing by turning on OTB AM this morning. Listen to us talk about football. So who is actually the best pundit on television? We're going to sort this out in World Cup format this morning. These are your Sky Sports pundits, your BT Sports pundits, and your Premier Sports pundits, people who give contributions on television. That's what I've limited to. And to all the 32 people who've made it this morning, congratulations. There was a longer list than this. I had about 50-something names. So if you've made it this morning, well done. You will get a certificate or something, and we'll get it out to you in the post. Without further ado, let's go into the groups this morning. There are some crackers, sure. Group A, in particular, is a group of death. We've got Jamie Carragher, we've got Rio Ferdinand, we have got Kenny Cunningham, and we've got Tim Sherwood. Who are you calling?
Well, not Tim Sherwood. Definitely not.
Not Tim Sherwood. So if Tim Sherwood doesn't finish bottom of the group, that'll be a bit of an upset. Can Kenny upset Jamie Carragher or Rio Ferdinand? I'm making Jamie Carragher the outright favourite for this. I think he's the best pundit. Yeah, I think he's the best pundit on television at the moment himself. And Roy Keane on Saturday night, absolutely outstanding. I should say that there was a committee assembled, a committee of one, to actually seed these things. So there should be a nice amount of fairness in each group.
Gary Neville's the favourite, right? Really?
I think we could see a Manchester United versus Liverpool outbreak on Twitter here to actually back their boy and see who wins. This is going to be on the Off the Ball AM Twitter account, by the way, all these Twitter polls today for the group stages. That is at Off the Ball AM. Group B is Roy Keane, Glenn Johnson, Damien Delaney and Robbie Savage. The Cork derby there in Group B. Group C is your favourite, Gary Neville, Owen Hargreaves, Kevin Doyle and Paul Scholes. I am backing Kevin Doyle to get out of that group if enough Irish people actually vote in this poll and this doesn't actually make its way over to the English Channel, which, let's face it, is probably likely. Group D is Graham Souness, the raging hot favourite here again. Joe Cole, Alex Scott and Martin Keown. Hard to call that one, but Souness I'd probably see going through. Group E is Chris Sutton, Peter Crouch, Karen Carney and Danny Murphy. Group F then is Alan Shearer, Eni Aluko, Jamie Redknapp and Steve McManaman. Group G, I think this could be the man who wins it. Micah Richards was the top seed here in this group, alongside Tim Cahill, Patrice Evra and Michael Owen.
That's kind of slightly imbalanced there, isn't it, really?
Why so?
Well, Tim Cahill's reputation after the Arsenal are getting it wrong, but at least they know how they're getting it wrong, whereas Man United haven't got a clue. That has come and bit him in the ass, hasn't it?
Well, he also does match of the day punditry, let's not forget. Let's not just judge him on his one Sky Sports outing, which he seems to have not been invited back after. His BBC contributions are always very good as well. Right. Patrice Evra is everybody loves Patrice Evra, and everybody loves Michael Richards.
Patrice Evra licked the chicken, the raw chicken breasts.
Oh yeah.
Good point. I can't have it. I can't have it. There was too much. It was too much, Patrice. It was just a bit too much. Now, his book is in the works, and by all accounts, it's going to be absolutely amazing. I'm looking forward to that. And actually, you never turn him off. But that video of him licking the chicken, no thanks.
The question in Group G really is going to be: is voluntary salmonella better than Michael Owen's punditry? That is what this group is going to determine, and I'm looking forward to seeing how that actually turns out. Group H is Ian Wright, Glenn Hoddle, Jermaine Genius, and Dion Dublin. So a heavy BBC tint to Group H, which is our eighth and final group. Sorry to the likes of Clinton Morrison and Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank and Robbie Fowler and Robin Van Persie and Rob Green, who just didn't get the call and aren't included in the 32. They were like Netherlands in Euro 2016, didn't actually make it to the end. So there are your groups. We will get polls up shortly on @OffTheBallAM on Twitter. We will probably transfer to Instagram over the next couple of days as we get into the knockout stages. But it is very exciting. It is the big story this week. Who is actually the best live television Premier League pundit in the world? We've sure as hell watched enough of them over the last couple of months.
What do you think people actually want when they're watching punditry on TV?
They want controversy, and they want Roy Keane, and they want a soundbite, and they want a fight. They want to see a fight in the studio on television. That is what people want more than anything else.
Certainly, that was the recipe that made Eamon Dunphy the most highly sought-after commentator in Irish life. There was a time when Dunphy would have been earning $1 million a year, probably, from his various columns and TV appearances and everything, and his radio show. Like Peak of the Boom, that's astonishing. Now, close enough to $1 million a year, I'd say, and that the reason was because he was good for a fight all the time. People want fights, right? But did Gary Neville not change all that whenever Monday Night Football became his purview, or is that purely for the football hipsters?
Oh no, not for the football hipsters. I think that obviously is what people want as well. If they can be informed and entertained, they will take both. But I think entertainment probably comes ahead of information quite a lot. 100% that has changed, and I think what they did with Monday Night Football obviously was brilliant. And I think surely it's not just to preserve a football hipsters at the moment that they want to actually learn more about the game that they're watching. I'm sure like any analytics people out there are probably seeing their followings grow over the last couple of years. I think people are more interested in statistics. I think people realise that this is how people who are involved in football actually view the game. And as a result, the punditry should follow suit. It's what a lot of American sports has done. You can't watch an NFL game without being impressed by the level of analysis that they bring second by second. And I think the Premier League has followed suit. So yes, that is the home of it. But if you actually manage to deliver that in a way, or manage to create some sort of argument as a result of your analytical insight, then that is the secret sauce. And Gary Neville does bring that. I mean, like, he does say stuff that sometimes riles up opposition fans, for example. Jamie Carragher does the same thing while also being a brilliant analyst. And that, for me, is why they're probably two of the best pundits on Sky. But they just don't have the fire that Roy Keane brings. And I think the old school Eamon Dunphy-esque entertainment will never be beaten, no matter how many brilliant tactics boards you actually manage to show to the audience.
Yeah, because so is there a hybrid? Is it and is that what Sky have with Carragher versus Keane? With Keane, you can't look away because you don't know what he's going to say, but you know with Carragher you're going to get some education. Is that the perfect combo? Is that why you think that's the perfect combo?
Yeah, I think that's actually a good shout. I think that you almost have Jamie, like, so Saturday night, you almost have Jamie Carragher with a half smile on his face, knowing that Roy Keane is going to say something, and he is trying to cling to his own beliefs as a pundit to not get into a barroom brawl against Roy Keane here on television. Not that it ever got heated or anything on Saturday night. And then similarly, you have Roy Keane, who can't but be impressed with what Jamie Carragher is doing and wants to cling to his old school notions of what football punditry should be and what he's actually bringing to the table. So there is a reluctant admiration, I think, from both of them towards one another, and the product is just really good. Like, I'm not sure if people agree with that, but I definitely think Saturday night, when or any time that they have Carragher and Keane on together, it is the best punditry combo we have in television.
There's a piece in the back of the Telegraph sports section today actually talking about this, and he is saying, with Roy Keane, Graham Souness and Patrice Evra, the punditry trend is towards spicy, fiery concoctions, tasty and rich for sure, but do you necessarily want a vindaloo every meal? A very Telegraph phraseology there. Keane in particular feels like he might be only one more scenery-chomping glower away from getting tapped up by WWE on a contract as a dastardly heel. He's saying BT Sport is what you want. The comparison is BT Sport is ambient versus heavy metal of Sky.
Robbie Savage ambient? Is that what
he means? Okay, he hasn't actually mentioned Robbie Savage, I think, throughout this. He's talking about Rio Ferdinand. It doesn't have that tinderbox feel that Sky has cooked up. If we want constant debate and point scoring, many of us can get that at home. Hey, there you go. Oh God. All right.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'd go and describe BT as ambient. It is good coverage. I do like BT's coverage, but I think it all depends on the pundit that you have. Like, I mean, I think that a lot of the ire towards BT is often directed at whoever their co-commentator is, and Steve McManaman is probably the recipient of it more than anybody else this season. Like in studio, yeah, it tends to always be Rio. Like, quite often, it may be a lot last season. They had Robin van Persie being beamed in from abroad and all that. Like, there's a nice difference to it, I guess. And when they have good stuff to work with, it's great. But I think Sky are probably pulling away on the evidence of the last season.
And if we did this in GAA punditry, who would win that World Cup?
Oh, well, see, this is a whole different. Tomás O'Shea would win it. Sorry, I was trying to filibuster for a second to gather my thoughts. It didn't even need to think for that long. Tomás O'Shea is the best pundit in GAA.
Who would he beat in the final?
On television. Oh, and then you've also got, if you talk about Roy Keane and Jamie Carragher as a combo, the best combo we have on GAA at the moment is Jim McGuinness and Kieran Donaghy on Sky, which is just. I'm not saying that Kieran Donaghy is the Roy Keane of GAA and Jim McGuinness is Jamie Carragher of GAA. Jim McGuinness is very analytical, and Donaghy wouldn't be as big-mouthed as Roy Keane. So I don't know. There's a nice sort of analysis element to both of it. I think that it's almost like two Jamie Carraghers sitting together in the GAA stand.
Yeah, the Brodie is Roy Keane.
Brodie is Roy Keane. Brodie is Dunphy. Really, I think that's probably more of an accurate comparison, to be honest. And yeah, like I'd say, it's a shame that we had a full championship without Joe Brolly in his pomp and television. The first one, let's not forget, obviously we had a lot of it in the league earlier in 2020, but we obviously had to rely on his Sunday Independent contributions, which you would kind of miss. Like, you would miss the sort of, what is Brolly going to say after something crazy would have happened. Like, you would have loved to have had Brolly on after Kerry got beaten by Cork, for example, or after Donegal got beaten by Cavan. A shock result. The fans of a team who get beaten in such unexpected fashion tend to watch between their fingers as Joe Brolly comes out and says something. So we definitely did miss that. Okay,
let's move on, because everybody can vote on the @OffTheBall AM Twitter handle. Some of you are already subscribed to that and some of you aren't, but you should get on it. Right, so what are we at? Bang on 8:30 this morning. We've got rugby with Alan Quinlan coming up in about 9 minutes' time. First, let's hear from Brian Kerr, who was on commentary duty for OTB with Nathan for Leicester's defeat to Leeds.
So, Brian, Leeds have put a big dent in whatever title hopes Leicester had, a 3-1 victory. What went wrong for Leicester today?
I think you have to compliment Leeds and how they played, Nathan. Leicester just weren't at their best. They've obviously been on a very good run, 7 games unbeaten, 4 wins and 3 draws. But they struggled in the attacking part of the pitch in general today. Obviously, they conceded goals. And they never looked particularly settled at the back. Johnny Evans and Fofana in the first half, for whatever reason, never looked comfortable with Castagna at right back. Leeds made several good chances in the first half before, apart from the excellent goal they scored. And, you know, they'd got a good platform to do well in the game, Leicester, by scoring that goal. They started the match reasonably well. Brilliant goal, great work by Barnes. Lovely little ball back to him from Madison, 1-2. Had to juggle his feet. Lovely little touch to get it from his left foot and manoeuvre it into a position that he could score with his right foot. It was a great goal. But then within 2 minutes they conceded the goal. But they had looked likely to concede and never looked particularly comfortable with the back. The manager obviously wasn't happy at half time, and even before half time he made the change whether Castagna had an injury or not. Jack Harrison was causing him a problem, particularly from diagonal balls. He wasn't reading it very well, Castagna. And then they brought on Pereira at half time. Soyuncu came on too, and Soyuncu come on at half time. Pereira was already on, changed the system, but they never had a dominance in midfield today. That was one of the quietest games I've seen Tielemans play, and they're obviously missing Ndidi in midfield. Mendy's a very experienced player, has done well for them in the past, but didn't do it today. And obviously missing Vardy up front, who's such a key player. And Perez, you'd have to say, he didn't do enough today. Always strikes me, he's a little bit lightweight when it comes to the better teams, the big games. Not that Leeds are such an outstanding team, they're a middle table team, but physically he never seems to have it as an out-and-out centre forward. He always has to play off as centre forward or wide or in the number 10 position. But Leeds were the better team overall today. They took their chances well. Clinical in the second half, didn't make too many clear-cut chances. And Patrick Bamford, man of the match. The final pass for the first and third goals, and a magnificent finish for the second goal, which was the absolute crucial goal in the game.
Talk about Bamford then, because he's acknowledged himself there were a lot of questions coming into the season as to whether he was be good enough for the Premier League. He'd been around a few Premier League clubs, never probably got a run of games to show what he was all about. What is it about him that actually this season he has got to the level where he's on 11 Premier League goals, where he looks a very comfortable Premier League player?
Well, the reason why he hasn't played regularly in the Premier League before, and he's been around the league on the fringes of teams and got some games. You know, if I'd say about why do players move clubs so frequently, it's usually because they haven't done it at one club, but there's always another club that thinks they have some special ability, and that manager feels I'll get it from him. I think he's been one of those players who has always looked very elegant in possession and technically very skillful, but has always lacked a little bit of drive, I'd say, and physicality about him. the sort of stuff, a languid type of style that would frustrate certain managers that would be demanding of high energy, aggressive centre forward play. But now he's found a manager who believes him. Bielsa's a very demanding manager, and he's responded to those demands in not only a high work rate and I wouldn't say the most aggressive type of effort, but he gets around the pitch well and helps in the high press that is demanded by Bielsa in most games. But obviously his goal scored in 16 in the league last year as Leeds, in the end they won the league convincingly. I think they won the league by 10 points. Then this year he goes into the Premier League. You're wondering about him. I'm sure the Leeds fans wondered about him. Got off to a good start. He has 10 goals going into today's game, which is a goal every second game, just a little bit above that. But his performance today shows you why he's in the team and why they can't leave him out of the team. I mean, his touch and the timing of the pass on the first goal, first touch, and then the little touch outside of his left foot, putting it into the path of Dallas to score the goal. The timing and the weight of the pass, the run and the speed. He ran away from Evans. Not that Evans is one of the quicker players in the league now at 33, but he first of all to stay on side and be available for the pass on the left-hand side on the counter-attack. Then to run away from Evans, to be unselfish enough to say, right, well, he's going to be in a better position to score the goal than me. I'm going to put it into his path. I'm not going to add to my goal tally of 11 and make it 12. The most important thing was for the goal to be scored by Harrison. Times his own finish on the second goal. His all-round game today was great. His touch was good. Wasn't in the game as much in the second half, but there he was in the right place to score the second goal and make the third goal. Really good performance.
You said during commentary Leeds could now finish really anywhere from 6th to 16th because it is so tight. The job that Bielsa has done this season, he's put out there as the godfather of modern coaching because of the influence he's had on the likes of Pep Guardiola and Maurizio Pochettino. When you go through that Leeds side and where those players have come from and lower leagues and worked their way up through the last few years, it is a remarkable job he's doing. Just how good is it? And when you look at what he's done with Leeds, does he deserve an opportunity at one of the biggest clubs when another job comes up?
Well, I think he's a very different personality. He's obviously a very stubborn bloke. He seems to operate without contracts and deals with clubs on their word and his word, which is most unusual in today's management era. I would say that he might be hard going to work with as a club as well, because he's obviously a fairly stubborn individual in how he operates, and once he makes decisions, he expects them to be supported by the owners of a club. He's had several clubs where he hasn't stayed too long, where he obviously didn't feel that things were working out, or he wasn't given the authority that he wanted. I think he's in an ideal situation in that he's got Leeds up, several near misses in previous seasons, but with other managers and him himself, a couple of seasons where they just missed out, and then they make it finally last year. And it's with great joy and glee, so much frustration that Leeds have been off it and out of the Premier League for so many years. And, I think the best they could have hoped for this year was a steady season, first season back. And that's very much what they're having. But not only having a steady season, imagine how their fans would be reacting to the type of football they're playing and the fact that they're taking on the best. Yes, they concede goals and they've had a few hidings and the particular spanking by Manchester United, but equally they've handed out a few heavy defeats themselves. I mean, they've had a heavy defeat from Leicester earlier in the season, beaten 4-1, and today they turn it around against one of the best sides in the league and they win 3-1. So they are that type of team. They're unpredictable in a way of how the match will ultimately turn out, but what they are also predictable about is that you'll get a high energy performance, attacking performances, enthusiasm, creating chances, yes, coughing up a few chances as well, but it's a style that a supporter of any middle-ranking club would say, yes, we'll have a bit of this, rather than a relegation struggle, that's for sure. And I would think what it's done, it's given the owners the encouragement to invest further in the team. They've spent a bit of money on attacking players this year. You see the likes of Rodrigo, expensive boy from a big club in Spain. And, you know, a couple of other players that they've invested in, you'd say, yeah, they're prepared to have a bit of a go. So I think while it's mostly the same team as last year, I think Leeds fans can be happy that there'll be further investment, that they're not going to get relegated this year. As I said, I don't think they'll finish in the top 6, but they're certainly not going to be involved in any relegation scramble. And that's more than a good position for Leeds to be in. Given there's no fans in the ground and that passion that there is at Elland Road, how influential that could be, the way they're playing at the moment, but still they're getting results.
Yeah, they might have been out of the Premier League for 16 years. They still won't like you saying a mid-ranking team.
I mean in terms of where their standing is currently. I don't mean in their terms of their potential or their history. I mean, everybody who has followed football knows that Leeds have been a club in the past, got to the semi-final of Champions League under David O'Leary, have won leagues in that era, the Don Revie era, and what a great club they've been. But, you know, in recent years, they've also been clubs who've sold their ground and sold their training ground, and have been at a low ebb, with a lot of uncertainty around the ownership of the club, a lot of broken promises. This is a stable time for Leeds, and a great time, and it looks like Leeds could be on the way back to be at the it'll be hard for them to get back to the level that they were at in the, let's say, the 60s and 70s era in particular, and the Dave O'Leary times to a degree. It'll be hard for them to compete at that level again, but at least there's a potential for that now with stability. And, you know, if the stadium gets modernised, I think, and they can get bigger crowds in, they could return to a higher level than where they've been for many, many years.
We'll wait to see what happens with Liverpool, but it's been a good weekend for Manchester City so far. They got the job done yesterday, another win, another clean sheet, and then Manchester United end up drawing with Arsenal and more drop points, and it feels as though maybe a title challenge is a step too far for Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's side. What did you make of Manchester United, Arsenal? There was a sense, listening to Jamie Carragher after the match, that looking at the performance against Arsenal and Liverpool, that there was a missed opportunity there, that both those clubs were in a weakened state when United went to play them, and maybe United just didn't have the confidence just yet to go and kick on.
Yeah, I think there was a respect. Both sides had respect from the opposition's attacking threat, from the pace that they had in the attack. Now, as it happened, Arsenal missed a bit by not having Saka yesterday. Aubameyang, obviously, and Tierney, what Kieran Tierney gives him as an attacking player down the left-hand side, even though he's playing as a full-back. So I think from that point of view, I think it was a lost opportunity for Manchester United. But, you know, Solskjaer will probably look at it and say, well, we're away to Arsenal and we did okay, we didn't get beaten, it keeps our run going, we're there and thereabouts. But the problem is now that Manchester City are on a roll. They lost a couple of games early in the season, lost to Spurs early on, lost heavily to Leicester, then had some draws against some middling teams like West Ham even, and you're going, are they still in recovery, Manchester City? Are they at a weak point? But now they've really steadied the ship. They're on fire now. Eight wins, I think, eight wins in a row. And it's getting tougher for the chase and pack. They are in a position where they're in a position to get away a little bit, particularly Liverpool got a couple of difficult games before the big game next Sunday. But Manchester City are doing their own stuff. Forget about the opposition. They're doing their own stuff. As I pointed out the day before the match, they're on 44 points in 20 games. It's a good average. Not by Manchester City standards, but by anyone's standards. You're saying, well, you're averaging over 2 points a game. That's quite good. The problem is, for the other teams, is they are not even averaging that. They're below that. And Liverpool are way off where they were last season. Important win for them during the week against Spurs. But can they continue that? Can they get their whole mojo back in place that they had last season? It doesn't look like it with the problems that they have at centre back.
Great stuff, Brian.
Thank you, Nathan.
Brian Kerr and Nathan there talking in the aftermath of the game yesterday afternoon. That game was live on Off the Ball on News Talk. Now, it is 8:44. Let's turn our attention to rugby. Alan Quinlan is with us this morning. Alan, good morning to you. How are you getting on?
Morning, lads. Yeah, good. Thanks, Joe.
It's the start of Six Nations Week. I started the conversation, or finished the conversation last week about how optimistic you were feeling about Ireland ahead of the Six Nations. The time is telescoping. Are you getting more and more optimistic or more pessimistic as we head towards kickoff?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think it depends on the team is selected. And look, the team that will be selected, there's still question marks about the ability and the form of these players. Can they deliver? Can they reignite themselves? A lot of them have played well with their provinces in recent times. And can Ireland change the way they play and get their mojo back that they had in 2018, their accuracy around the breakdown, their pace, tempo, all that kind of stuff? Or will they be physically stopped or under pressure or put under pressure by the opposition? I think, look, Wales first up, I think, is if they start well in that game, it's very obvious. If they get an away win there, they've got France and Italy at home. You could, after 3 rounds, you could have 3 wins, full of confidence, building your game. The Six Nations can be tricky at times because you've a short kind of preparation time for all the teams to prepare and get up and running, and sometimes you can be rusty at the start of it. So it's a very difficult game, and Wales are under so much pressure with the performance they had in last year's Six Nations and November. So I don't know, Jared, somewhere in the middle. You can't get too excited and think Ireland are going to have a brilliant Six Nations, given what we've seen in the last kind of 18 months to 2 years from the team. But they're good enough. I think if they develop their game and they get some pace into it, they have players who can perform and really hurt the opposition. You know, you think of get the ball to Ringrose, Larmour, Earls, Keane, and these guys. They're exciting. They're full of energy, enthusiasm, and they can score tries and make line breaks. And hopefully, but the big emphasis is going to be on our halfbacks. I think Sexton and Murray, if they play well, Ireland will be in a good place. But they're well capable of going to Wales for sure and winning there. But if they were to lose that one, it puts them in a tough position going forward.
What are you looking for from Conor Murray this week to see if he's in form or not?
Just a bit of zip to his game. Particularly around his passing. He gets to blame a lot when we go back to these box kicks on and the game slows right down, and he's had that criticism from Munster, and Ireland have had it a bit in the last couple of years. So look, it's obviously part of the game plan. So what will Mike Cat be saying? What does he want from the team, from his back line and the head coach Andy Farrell, where to attack, where to move the ball? Sometimes, of course, you have to kick, and the kicking is a really important part of the game, but it's the type of kicks we have. I'd like to see Johnny Sexton kick out of hand a little bit more rather than slowing it down and using this box kick option all the time. I've said that for a long time. A lot of the teams do it. England, get all the plaudits, deservedly so, in the last kind of 12 to 14 months, and they've been incredibly good. They probably should have won a World Cup. They've been the dominant side, and they're a level above the other Six Nations teams. They kick an incredible amount as well. And it's, when you're dominating games and you're on the front foot and you're ahead in the scoreboard, bad kicks can be viewed as good kicks because you're turning the opposition around. But when you're chasing games, and there's a little bit of frustration there about the way we're playing, I think so they've got to get that balance right. Of course, you've got to kick out of your own half and not mess around there too much, and it's an important part of the game. So I just love to see a bit of zip in Conor. I think he's his form has been pretty good, but I'd like to see a little bit more, bit of sniping from him, and crisper passing.
Do you think it'd be within Johnny Sexton's rights to go to the coaching staff and say, I want to kick a little bit more in open play? Or does the onus have to be on the coaching staff here if you're going to make that big a change?
Yeah, well, of course, I think he can make that decision himself. The two of them are very, very experienced. And look, it's easy for people watching, or if you're at the game and you're you're up in the media position or the commentary box looking down at to see other options to say, try and get it in the 10's hands as quick as you can. And look, it depends on a lot of things on. If your forwards are dominant and the ball is quick, ideally you want to try and really get it to the 10 as quick as you can, and he can make that crossfield kick decision or just punt from on the run, if you like. And England do that well. You know, George Ford does it really well when he gets the ball, because usually the ball is really quick. If someone's made a line break, they're over the game line. So, of course, Johnny Sexton has that, can make those decisions himself. But it's just about getting that flow. Of course, the slower down box kicks happen when you don't get over the gain line. You're in your own 22 and you want to try and exit. So getting the balance right is the key. And like I said, bad kicks or the number of kicks don't really come into it when you win games and you win them well.
We had Sexton on Friday night talking to us from the bubble in Carton House, and we talked about what Ronan O'Gara had said previously, I think on the Tuesday or Wednesday here. He was talking about how there could be an extension to Sexton's career where somebody, ideally Joey Carbery, puts himself in the box seat as the number 10, and then Sexton becomes the finisher of games as opposed to the starter of games. Is this an ideal case scenario for us? Are we living in fantasy land if we think it'll actually work out nicely for us like that? Or is that something that, if you're the Irish Rugby management, you're thinking, actually, you know what, we could nurse Sexton the whole way through to a World Cup where he is the person coming off the bench with 15 minutes to go, and what a great thing that would be to have in our arsenal if we wanted it.
Yeah, it depends. It's a game by game, tournament by tournament kind of situation. If Johnny Sexton is playing well, he should start. If he's not, doesn't have the same kind of energy or fitness or zip in himself, of course it's an option. You know, I've played on teams where you've had an experienced fly half coming on, and it's about game management. I've always said this, and I'm not an expert on it, but you want your 10 to manage the game for you, put you in the right areas, make the decisions when to pass, when to run, when to kick. And, you know, Sexton is a proven winner. His temperament and his drive and desire can never be questioned. So it just depends on the player himself. If that situation arose, I think if Joey Carbery was back, if Harry Byrne makes the step up, if somebody else kind of grabs hold of the reins there, of course it's an option. You can imagine if Ireland were in the next couple of seasons, and this is a transitional period where hopefully, you know, there's some young players have come into the team, and maybe there'll be a few more in the next period of time, that you're winning a game and you're trying to close out a game. And if you had that option, if Sexton didn't start and coming off the bench, well, you know, the body slows down a little bit for sure, but his experience and his temperament and ability to deal with pressure in big games would be a massive advantage and bonus to have going forward for sure. So, look, it's up to the coaches. I think first and foremost, you know, both the boys are being politically correct in what they're saying. They're saying the right things, but I'd have no issue with Johnny Sexton if he wasn't being selected. You don't just cast someone away, and I've seen it with many players over the years. Having an experience, you just cannot beat experience. But the team have to be playing well, Ger, and they have to be going in the right direction. And age was never an issue for me as regards viewing someone as saying they're too old. If they're playing well enough, and if they have, and particularly if they're training well enough, and we don't talk about this enough in sport. A lot of players and coaches see things that we don't see in training. And if they're producing it in training and they have that zip and energy, well, it doesn't really matter. You know, older players can still perform, albeit they may not be able to do it for the full duration of games. But there's massive value in having experience and temperament of guys who've been there, won and lost, experienced the good days, the bad days, different situations, and so I would see that, yeah, for sure. If he's not our starter in the next 2 to 3 years, that if he's still playing professional sport, he's still fit enough, I'd have no issue with him having him in around the group, because that influence and that experience can rub off on other players.
Yeah, and I suppose it's a conversation now because O'Gara brought it up and it was a good thing to talk about, but also because these contracts are all being decided now. And if that was something that you thought you were going to have a value in, then you could build something, you could bake some kind of performance-related clauses into a contract if he wants to go to the World Cup and you go to the World Cup it's about the long-term planning, really, and having it in your head that this is an option, as opposed to saying we are absolutely going to do this and you won't be our first choice. Because if he's the best player at the time, you know, fair play to him, and that's an amazing thing that he's managed to achieve, to be the best player. I just want to move on a little bit and talk about that kind of long-term stuff. We had Brian O'Driscoll on last week as well, and we were talking about the importance of this Six Nations. If you're the head coach right now of Ireland, O'Driscoll kind of just in passing made the point that, look, you're not going to sack your coach a year out from the World Cup. So essentially, get through this and they're kind of guaranteed to be in charge for the next World Cup, because that World Cup cycle will take on its own momentum. So don't experiment now. Win a few games, make sure you're still okay and the pressure is abated, and next year can look after itself. And then, therefore, that'll be another block and you'll be starting to plan for the World Cup, which makes this absolutely the single most important 5-6 weeks of Andy Farrell's coaching career.
Yeah, look, I don't. If Ireland had a good Six Nations this year and potentially won the championship, or everyone would be saying we've turned the corner and we're 2.5 years out from a World Cup. Can we do it in France, and will we get it wrong again? I think we're at a stage now, and sport can be ruthless for players and coaches. If Ireland did well here and did dreadful in next year's Six Nations, I don't see any reason why the coaches wouldn't be under pressure that they get a free pass, because I think Ireland are at that situation now where we have to make sure that do as much as we can to try and get to the knockout stages and beyond the quarterfinals in rugby in the Rugby World Cup in 2023. But you do get, it's like a player having a bad game, Ger. If they have 6 or 7 brilliant games and then they have 2 or 3 bad ones, there is a tendency to go back and say, look, we just got to find the form again in the player. He's been there, he's done that, and he's delivered. And it can be a tricky situation. But I think there's added pressure on Andy Farrell, Mike Catt in particular, as to what we've seen in the last 18 months to 2 years. And the evolution of the team and the way we're playing and some of the really disappointing results. I think we do scrutinise and analyse the team a lot, and you know, sometimes, particularly, I get frustrated and angry at times when people kind of write them off and say we're finished and Irish rugby is this and that and the other thing, because we do have a small pool of players. We don't have the resources maybe and the power and the physical attributes of England, New Zealand, South Africa. And we're in a level below. And if we jump up to the top level and sit at that table for a period of time, that's fantastic. And we did that for a few years. We're in that level below now, and there's potential, obviously, to get up to the top table again. But and the World Cup story will keep going on unless we get to a semi-final or beyond. But I think it's the way we've played probably in the last period of time, and there is glimpses of change, and there is glimpses of more expansion and ambition within the players and the coaching team to get on the front foot again and to play with a bit more excitement and a bit more free flowing, which may suit them, because you know the game has changed a lot in the sense that the physicality has really come back into it. The kicking game, the defenses are on top. Rugby has become ponderous at times, and you know, teams who are not maybe get physically dominated, they've got to find a way to go around the opposition. And so we're somewhere, you know, we were still well able to be physical, but we have players who have ability to make line breaks, as I said, and stuff like that. So Ireland losing games isn't the end of the world, but I think sometimes it's the way we've lost them. So we have to try and get a little bit more excitement. So absolutely, because there's question marks about Andy Farrell. Is he good enough? Is he the man for the job? Can he manage this transition and get Ireland back to to that top table again. He was there under Joe for so long. He would have learned a huge amount under Joe Schmidt. So there's a lot of scrutiny and pressure. If they have a good Six Nations, it'll be incredibly positive and there'll be lots to build on. If it goes bad, well, question marks will arise about the coaching team. And that's the ball game, I suppose. Some quick points to wrap up with here. The 40 minutes that Tyke Furlong got at the weekend, how important is that going to be? Yeah, incredibly important. He's vital. He's world class when he's fit and strong. Hasn't played for a long period of time, so that was sufficient. I'm sure the message was don't play him any longer. Maybe Leo Cullen said maybe a little bit into the second half, but I think that's incredibly important. Good week's training, and I think he'll be back involved in the match day 23 for next week. Harry Byrne played really well. How close is he to getting a look or a call in a meaningful way, and not just to kind of tackle bags? I'm sure he'll train with them and he'll be involved. He's not a named in the Six Nation squad, but every time I see him, I just think there's something about him. There's a confidence and ability. He's big. He's physical. His kicking game is good, and he has that bit of X factor that you want. So I saw Will Greenwood tweeting about him. I saw Brian O'Driscoll tweeting about him. I looked on social media. Shane Williams was speaking after the game in an interview saying this guy is the real deal and has the potential. Look, he's young. He probably needs more exposure with Leinster and at European level. It was a pity he missed that Northampton game in December where he was due to start. But I'd be incredibly excited about Harry Byrne, and I thought he was superb at the weekend. You got to look at the opposition as well, and you know they're missing. They can't. Most teams, and we've said this a lot, can't cope with all their internationals away. Leinster are the one team that they just bring a different level with their perceived second string. And but he was very, very good at the weekend, Harry Byrne. Okay, and then the last thing that's happened over the last 24, 48 hours or so is Australia stepping in to offer to host the Lions tour. It seems completely ridiculous, and then you think about it, actually they could have full stadiums and everybody might make a little bit of money and everybody might be happy about the fact that it's going on there. Is this a runner, do you think? I think it is a runner. I don't know if logistically, people who are all booked to South Africa and booked in different hotels and different packages they were on, can they switch all that and bring them to Australia and get 30, 40, 50,000 for test matches? The logistics of that, I don't know how all that will work, but I think from having crowds at Lions matches would be, it's what it's all about. It's really important. I think having it in South Africa with no crowds for sure will give South Africa the TV money, and they're in desperate need for money. They're financially hamstrung at the moment and in a very, very serious situation. So they're desperate for some sort of a Lions tour to go ahead to at least get the TV money. To have the crowds would be incredible. And I think people, the first thing they think of here is, well, will Australia make money out of it? And they've come out and said, the CEO Hamish McLennan said, look, we don't want to make any money out of this, we just want to cover our costs. So there'll be stadium costs, and any money that would be generated from ticket sales and crowds being there, and the commercial activity would be split between Lions and South Africa. So is it a better solution for South Africa? Taking it out of the country would be disappointing for them, but playing it with crowds and actually getting more on top of the TV money would be a better situation. And I just think to have crowds at a Lions series would be incredible. And otherwise, I just think it'd be very, very eerie, and I think it should be postponed otherwise. But then that hits into summer tours next year and stuff like that, and the World Cup kind of cycle. So I think it's a real runner. Will they go for it? I don't know. I think the players would be desperate to play any sort of a Lions series on both sides. And Rassie Erasmus spoke about it there to the media a week or two ago, saying that they're open to all options. So let's hope we have some sort of a tournament. I think it'd be great to see crowds, even if it was on Australia. The whole Lions thing is about going on the tour with the players, being part of something different. It would be a shame it's not in South Africa, but I think Australia would certainly make up for it. All right, Alan, good stuff. We'll talk to you again on Friday. Cheers. Cheers. Thanks, lads. Alan Quinlan giving us some thoughts there on the start of the Six Nations countdown.
We'll obviously be keeping up with all the breaking news across the week on the OTB Sports app and, of course, on the evening show on Off the Ball and News Talk 2. Here's what we've got on OTB Sports Radio for you today. You can listen to this on the OTB Sports app. At 1 o'clock, it's OTB Gold, the Jack Charlton era with Paul McGrath. Our History of Sport lecture series from Paul Rouse at 3. Culture Hall of Fame is Peter Coonan at 4 o'clock. And then Jack McCaffrey's interview with Joe Malloy at 6. Tonight, live from 7, obviously a reaction to all the weekend stuff, and I look forward to what's coming for the rest of the week as well. A reminder, OTB AM live every morning from 7:30 in association with Gillette. Good morning start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. We're back with Deal or No Deal and the pressure rankings next.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station. Off the Ball.
So listen, I don't know when I'll talk to you again. It won't be if ManUtd are faltering, but if they're doing really well.
No, you call me any you want, man. I'll happily. Like, I mean, if ManUtd do go on to win the league, though, I'm throwing my phone in the river.
Oh, man.
Off the Ball. Weeknights from 7 and weekends from 1.
This is OTB Sports Radio, live 24/7 on the OTB Sports app.
Calling all builders, joiners, plasterers and dryliners. Need advice on the right materials for the job? Consider it done. You need them on site and in your hand. Consider it done. You want access to over 10,000 products from the leading construction brands without having to start up the van. Consider it done. There's another way of doing things. eTag. We talk with you to solve your problem and deliver what you need directly onto site. No second guessing, no seconds wasted. Click etag.ie.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
5 minutes past 9 this morning here on OTB AM. It's Sharon Owen with you every morning from 7:30 all the way through until 10. It's time for the pressure rankings.
For me, it was a self-imposed pressure.
Was I under pressure? No.
Yeah, they're under pressure. Everyone's under pressure.
OTB AM's pressure rankings with Gillette.
And the big pressure.
Pressures for tyres, Owen. Who's under pressure this week?
We're going 5-1. Somebody who's not under pressure, actually, we should start off with, as we mentioned at the top of the show, is Wales. No pressure whatsoever on Wales. I'm not sure if you want to weigh in on their omission first.
Well, they're just rubbish, isn't that it? They've fallen so far in the stocks of this show that they don't even merit a mention on the week where we're going to thrash them. Like, not been a very happy hunting ground for us. Was it Sidoli wrestling and punching Paul O'Connell when Wales won a Grand Slam, and they taunted us forever after it with the coach that we stabbed in the back, according to his own words. We basically gifted them Warren Gatland and their greatest ever era. So, you know, it's going to be sweet, sweet, sweet music in the valleys when we beat them this weekend.
I'm not even sure if you could go as far as calling it sweet, because they just don't register this week on the top 5. Are they significant at all, would be my question. Let's get on to some of the actual countries that matter in this year's Six Nations. And at number 5, we're going to go with a few Irish names here. First of all, at number 5 is Paul O'Connell. I think that because of the name that he is, the profile that he has, there is immediate pressure on him, because, I don't know, his CV has been held up and people have questioned, rightly I guess, the CV that he's already earned, and perhaps people have asked a question about whether or not he would have got this job without being Paul O'Connell. But I do wonder if somebody who is retired from the game, what was it, 2016, less than 5 years since his retirement, deserves a bit of a break. If you look at the actual people he has at his disposal in the forwards for Ireland, it's a back row that is still very deep. There are players coming back. You had Dan Levy back at the weekend. He could play down the line maybe this calendar year for Ireland. You've got a second row in James Ryan, who is you. You are looking at the new you, Paul O'Connell. All you've got to do is make this guy as good as you. And the one pressure zone really is your hooker. If you can nail the throw on the line out, the rest should follow suit. That is the one area where you look at and you say there could be a bit of a problem there. But at the same time, it's a very fixable thing. And there is pressure on him. But I do wonder if quickly it's going to lift, and that's why he's in at number 5 rather than any higher up on the list.
Is there a little bit... So I don't think he's under pressure immediately, because they brought him in because obviously they felt like they needed something. And if you think about how the whole coaching ticket worked, the head coach left and Andy Farrell ascended to that gig, and Andy Farrell's gig had been then taken by Simon Easterby, who was already doing forwards. So he took forwards and defence. and now they've taken the forwards bit off Simon Easterby, and he's just defence. But you are working still for somebody who's considered a defensive guru as the head coach. Now, obviously, the head coaching job is so much bigger than that, and you can't be doing the nuts and bolts of the defence, but you're getting your homework checked every day, no doubt, if you're Simon Easterby, by the boss. I'd say he's under a bit more pressure, really, if Ireland's defence isn't great. He's had the forwards, which was his main gig, under Joe Schmidt, taken away. And so all of a sudden, you're like, okay, you've got Paul O'Connell, who they're not going to get rid of straight away, who they're going to give a bit of time to do. So,
yeah.
That was also
I just
something
clarify?
O'Driscoll mentioned in the background as well, that, like, if it's not Andy Farrell, it might be the backroom team.
Pressure doesn't necessarily mean you're under pressure with your job. That's not what I'm saying here at all. And I think when we do pressure rankings for managers in the Premier League, that's naturally what it is. I'm talking about the pressure that's on Paul O'Connell because he is Paul O'Connell. And if you're parsing through the coaching ticket in 8 to 10 weeks' time after a poor Six Nations, if that's what transpires, I just wonder if his name is going to be plucked out quicker than it would have been if he's not Paul O'Connell. Yeah. And that's why I have him here on the pressure ranking. He's under no immediate job threat. This isn't the threat rankings. This is just pressure. Yeah. And there's separate things.
And I'm sure he's putting himself under his own pressure on that as well. But Sean O'Brien, in a piece last week, talked about how the maul is something that Ireland have not used properly in the last 18 months. So obviously we have, in our mind's eye, we see Paul O'Connell driving the Irish maul and being in the middle of that and mauler in chief. So if we can have some mauls and consistency in the line-out, then that's a massive win and you're immediately pointing to it. So let's wait and see. But yeah.
I think Easterby's a good shout, but I've gone for Mike Catt at number 4 just because of how Ireland's attack has approached things over the last little while. And I think Alan Quinlan almost touched on this exact point a couple of minutes ago when he was uncertain himself about how Ireland are actually going to approach things in attack. It seems that there's uncertainty about what Conor Murray is going to be instructed to do. Is he going to box kick? Is he not going to box kick? Is Johnny Sexton going to kick a lot more from 10? It seems there's a bit of uncertainty about that. And sure, as Quinlan said, there is pressure on the players to ensure that this goes well. But there is also pressure on your attack coach on what the actual philosophy is. And I know Matt Williams has hammered this quite a lot over the last few months, this idea of heads-up rugby. We're hearing it, and we have heard it quite a bit from the Ireland camps over the last year. And Matt Williams would make the point that heads-up rugby suggests a lack of a plan. Now, the counterpoint to all of this is that the heads-up rugby has ended up in Ireland scoring quite a few tries. You'll remember it was a Big Fat Crappy Quiz of the Year question last year, who scored the most tries in the Six Nations. And Ireland had actually finished joint top in terms of scoring the most tries, despite the mood music around the camp being, well, we haven't got our attack humming. Now, I think you can probably challenge the 17 tries a little bit, and you can say that when you look at their attack against France and England, only one of those tries came in the first half, that they needed the game to break down a little bit in the second halves of those games for their attack to get into full flow. 2 of those tries, they scored a try when the clock was in the red beyond the 80th minute in both of those games. Again, the game had opened up by, you remember the chip kick against France that led to the opportunity for the final try in the Six Nations. Those are the sort of things that Ireland have been doing. The heads-up rugby, the innovation and the off-the-cuff nature of their play. But what is their plan? What are they going to do when they have ball in hands in the first minute of the game at the weekend? What is their attacking philosophy? And for that reason, I think Catt is under a degree of pressure.
Yeah, I think you're definitely going to be when people don't. I don't know. It's a very technical game. People don't fully understand exactly why one team snuffs out another team, and you look over and you see the tries that we conceded last year. Remember the one that England ran the length of the pitch, and like, why can't we do that? Well, and England did it once, and all of a sudden they're world leaders. But actually, England are nothing if not a Joe Schmidt prototype team. That's Oh, look at those. Remember those times when we used to have Joe Schmidt as our head coach? So what's next?
Number 3, we've got Ross Byrne and Billy Burns. Byrne and Burns. Because of the fact that you mentioned Harry Byrne there with Alan, we know that Joey Carberry is coming back to fitness, and if there is an autumn series this year, he's probably going to figure. And we know that there are 2 other really talented out-halves coming out of Munster at the moment. This could be... the lads are 25 and 26, I think, so there's no such thing as a last chance saloon for them just yet, but this is a really good opportunity for them to put their hand up and say to Andy Farrell, listen, I am better than the other guy. If you are Ross Byrne, you want to say I'm better than Billy Burns, because if there is another person in the mix, if Joey Carberry does reinstate himself as number 2 out half, you want to be the person that survives. Johnny Sexton isn't getting any younger. There are going to be minutes, significant minutes against Italy, you'd imagine, decent minutes against Scotland, and probably good minutes off the bench for 15-20 in a lot of the other games as well. This is a massive opportunity for one of these players to bolt ahead of the other, but for the sake of this, it is pressure because there is a world in which you see neither of these players being a part of the Ireland squad next year. That is the grimmest possible outcome. I'm sure that one or both of them will probably still have a lot to say about that in 12 months' time. But I do think the opportunity to actually put your hand up and say, I am the successor to Johnny Sexton, now is the time to be doing that, especially when there's a couple of injuries or a little bit of inexperience elsewhere in the position. We're going to move on very quickly then to the last couple of points in this morning's pressure rankings. And really, we just can't hold a candle to these teams. At number 2, it is France, the 2023 World Cup champions. And at number 1 is England, the 2023 World Cup champions. Just 2 fabulous, fabulous teams. We just can't possibly hope to match these 2 teams. And what a story it would be if we even managed to score a try against them.
But at least Wales aren't under any pressure because they're still rubbish. That's this week's pressure rankings.
OTB AM's pressure rankings with Gillette.
Okay, 9:15 this morning. Give us your thoughts on that or anything else. You can get in touch with us by WhatsApp. 0879 180 180 is the number. It is time for the final deal or no deal of the 2020-2021 January transfer window.
I signed for them after the Euros, and after my first day's training, I was driving home. I was actually thinking, regretting it. What have I done? Like I walked into a circus.
It's amazing, isn't it? It's our winter window special as the winter window closes, and we get all nice and cosy because spring has sprung. Phil Egan, good morning to you. How are you?
How are you doing, Chair? How are you getting on?
This is very exciting, the last day. What time does it actually close?
11 o'clock for England and 12 o'clock for Scotland, and it possibly could be the quietest ever deadline day, I think. Like, I'm wondering, are Sky even bothering with Jim White today?
Oh, they have to, surely, for old times. Like, it's 11 p.m, I presume. It's not like in 2 hours' time. Okay, Grant, so not a midday thing. At least there is some activity around Liverpool, who have decided that the end of the transfer window is a good time to do business as opposed to the start of the transfer window. Why didn't they just sign Ben Davis a month ago?
I don't know. I mean, was their mind made up maybe last weekend at Old Trafford when Reece Williams was exposed? And, you know, he's played a few games this season where he's done all right. And I think just that mistake that he made for the Rashford goal in the FA Cup game against Manchester United, maybe Klopp just decided, yeah, look, I just can't keep putting this lad in. Obviously, for the game previously, the week before, he'd gone with Henderson and Fabinho, but obviously Nat Phillips played yesterday and played rather well. He's played both games against West Ham in the Premier League and different kind of games. But say, for example, now Liverpool play Brighton on Wednesday. You know, Brighton have lots of nippy little players where they're going to be in and around just quick 1-2s. And maybe that's the kind of game that wouldn't suit a player like Nat Phillips. I don't think I remember him losing a header yesterday. Everything he went up for, he won. And one stage as well, he threw himself into a tackle with Antonio. So, you know, he's a game player, but I think it's all well and good maybe doing it in a 1 or 2 games, but as you play more and more, then teams start to figure you out and start playing the balls down beside you, and that's probably where someone like Nat Phillips would struggle. But in fairness to him, he did himself no harm. In terms of getting somebody in like Ben Davis, it's a guy that obviously they're hoping that he could improve.
He's the new Andy Roberts.
Well, I don't know. I mean, he can play left back as well, but I suppose it seems strange when you've got a team like the Premier League champions trying to get themselves back into the title race. Obviously, the next 6 days are going to be crucial, but they're spending $2 million on a player. Obviously, there was some expectancy that they might try and sign a more high-profile defender as well. It doesn't look like that's going to happen.
Well, there was some talk about the guy from Marseille, right?
Yeah, Chalet Tsar, the Croatian. From reports in France, suggested that he was actually on his way in terms of getting the flight over, but Marseille blocked it. They said that we don't have a player to replace you with, so this deal can't happen. He was meant to go to West Ham at the start of the season, but decided against it. And interesting, he's a right-footed player and has that ability that Van Dijk has, where he can ping a 60-yard pass from the centre of defence just to turn defence into attack straight away. And obviously we saw how clinical Liverpool can be on the counter-attack when we've got somebody that can ping a pass. I know it was Trent Alexander-Arnold yesterday that played the ball. Shaqiri obviously then played to Salah, but maybe it's something that might happen in the summer. Maybe Marseille might actually think the money is too good and they'll be scrambling around to try and get a replacement in. But I'd be surprised if it did happen today.
Okay. Is Ben Davies going to save Liverpool's season, or is it too late? Has the season already been saved, Phil?
Well, as I said, the next 6 days, obviously, City are away to Burnley on Wednesday at 6, and then you'd imagine they win that. They go 7 points clear. Liverpool have to beat Brighton then at Anfield at the 8:15 kickoff. Then, you're 4 points in going into that game at Anfield next Sunday. Obviously, City still have a game in hand. But if Liverpool were to win their next 2 games and just be a point behind City still having a game in hand, but City's fixture is getting a bit trickier because I know once this game against Burnley is done, we had talked about their next 6 games a good while back, saying there's a fair chance City will have a good sizable lead going to Anfield. And to be honest, 3 weeks ago, if you'd said to me that if Liverpool could be 4 points behind City going into that game at Anfield, I absolutely would have taken that, because Liverpool were obviously out of form. They weren't scoring goals, but now Mo Salah has got his mojo back, as all the headlines said this morning.
Bitten her hand off, Phil.
Surely, absolutely, snapped your hand off, bitten it off, whatever. Yeah.
Surely there's a lot of pressure on a guy to save a season if he isn't even the best player named Ben Davies in the Premier League.
Well, I mean, Ben Davies, Spurs edition, isn't having the best season either, is he? So
he has been a Premier League season, a Premier League player for quite some time.
Absolutely. But I don't think they're just going to turn around and just throw him in there. Say there might be a game where, they're out of the cup competition, so they can't even give him a cup game. Obviously, the only other competition they're in is the Champions League. So again, if they're going to throw him in, you would imagine that they're going to have an experienced player beside them, whether it's Jordan Henderson, whether it's Fabinho, and this is a guy that I don't know if he's going to play that much, to be honest. I think they just need numbers there, and as I said, I think this is just bumping him up ahead of Reece Williams.
He'll make 10 to 12 appearances before the end of the season, guaranteed, just because the way the fixtures are coming thick and fast. Assuming he can, get fit and understand how the football is supposed to be played. They've got a reasonable track record of buying these type of players. I can see them certainly using him in a load of games off the bench if they need to close games out. But let's move on. I do want to. It's not slated to be talked about. But in retrospect, was Barcelona not selling Leo Messi last summer and removing the final year of his 555 million contract one of the stupidest things that's ever happened in the history of world football, given that Barcelona appear to be $1 billion in debt, despite the fact they've had the cash cow of Lionel Messi for his entire career. For the last 17 years, they've had this genius on their books, and they've managed to rack up $1 billion in debt.
Hold on. You're suggesting that not selling the greatest player of all time was one of the stupidest decisions of all time?
They would have got money for him. They would have taken that 100 million off. They would have essentially ended up 200 million in profit if they'd sold him to Manchester City for 100 million last summer, or 80 million or 60 million, whatever it was, when he handed the transfer in. Now, instead, they've just run down their debt, kept a player who doesn't want to be there, and completely plunged the club even further into chaos. You're talking about a 200 million swing from a 600 million debt to a billion debt, or a 1.2 billion debt if you read some places, to 800 million. I mean, my maths aren't great, but I would prefer to be 800 million in debt than 1.2 billion.
Yeah,
sure.
Throw in the Luis Suarez deal to Atletico as well. That doesn't seem like a great idea either, considering he's banging in goals for Atletico and they're absolutely walking away with the league at the moment. I know there's still a fair bit to go in the La Liga title race, but yeah, Barcelona have been abysmal in terms of what they do off the pitch. There's too much politics involved at the top end of the club, and obviously the whole Messi saga is a political struggle, and he obviously has had enough. And it looks like he's going to leave. We don't know where he's going to go.
Is he worth 100 million in wages next season?
Yeah, I see. At the moment, he's not playing in a very good team, but put him into a functional team, and you start seeing the best of Messi again. And obviously, everyone's talking about him playing for Manchester City. Imagine putting him into the Manchester City team at the moment, where they're zipping the ball around. Messi would make that team a hell of a lot better.
Okay, it's a lot of money. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's nothing to City.
It certainly is. We know City have a lot of money.
Does it? If you're Kevin De Bruyne and you're getting what you thought was good money, I don't know how much money Kevin De Bruyne is on. Is he on 20 million a year? Is that, would he be on a bit more than that?
Well, he's trying to
would he be on
get a new
25
contract
million?
at the moment, and they've kind of hit a stumbling block because he probably thinks he's worth more than he is now. Maybe next weekend at Anfield without De Bruyne, if City were to lose that game, De Bruyne can go back in on the Monday and say, "See, you kind of need me. This is what happens when I'm not there."
Reports in the French media, to move on back to Liverpool, suggest that Klopp has met with Kylian Mbappe's entourage and he is seriously pressing them to convince the World Cup winner to come to Anfield. So, is he a like-for-like swap for Bobby Firmino, and away you go, Sadio Mane, Kylian Mbappe, Mo Salah, thanks very much.
You've just left out Diogo Jota as well.
On the bench,
he was brilliant before he got injured. I don't really see this Mbappe deal to Liverpool happening. I know Neymar actually gave probably one of his biggest indications of his future after last night's game. PSG were actually beaten last night by Lorient, a team in the bottom three. But afterwards he said, I want to stay. I want Kylian to stay. I want PSG to be a great team. So, I mean, he's pretty much put the ball in PSG's court, and he's putting the pressure on Kylian Mbappe. And we mentioned Messi as well. That was another deal that was kind of talked about. Would he go to PSG to link up with Neymar again? But it didn't seem possible that you'd have Neymar, Mbappe and Messi. So I've always felt that if Mbappe's going, he's going to go to Real Madrid. And I think Liverpool will be encouraged for the last few weeks, what they've seen out of their front three. Obviously, Jota still has to come back from injury. But there is definitely a serious drop-off. Origi played yesterday, wasn't very good. Obviously, Shaqiri played, set up the Salah counter-attack goal, showed glimpses. But Mbappe's on a different level to those lads as well. And there's always been that drop-off with the front three, and that's where Jota was brought in. And okay, he's injured at the moment, but Mane was missing yesterday. If Jota was fit, he would have slotted in there, no bother. But yeah, I'd be like the money you have to pay for Mbappe. We're talking about Liverpool paying $2 million for a central defender, and then in the few minutes later we're talking about Mbappe. That would be massive money they'd have to pay for it.
Well, here's a solution to that problem. If you want to get this unbelievable front line together, a club that does have the money is Paris Saint-Germain. So let Liverpool swoop on in for Mo Salah, and then you've got a Neymar, Mbappe, Mo Salah attack force lining out in Paris. Maybe Lionel Messi linked to Paris Saint-Germain as well. Wouldn't this answer all the hopes and dreams of Liverpool fans who want to see Mbappe and Salah play together?
Yeah, sure. I think Salah obviously, last week came out and said that, or a couple of weeks ago, basically said, look, it's up to Liverpool now what they want to do. But I think it's funny, like Liverpool obviously stopped scoring goals and everyone blamed it on a couple of things. Thiago obviously is a huge problem according to some people. And then you have Salah doing that interview with Spanish radio where he had talked about, talking about playing in Spain for Real Madrid or Barcelona. I don't know how Barcelona are paying for him, but then he starts getting his mojo back and he starts saying, it's up to Liverpool what they want to do. And I think Liverpool looking at that game yesterday is like, obviously they want to keep Salah. So, yeah, Salah and Mane I don't think are going to go anywhere. If one of the front three was going to go, I would have thought it'd be Firmino. But, maybe the last few weeks have convinced Firmino, like, why would you want to go? Like, this is as good as it gets.
We've got about 3 minutes left here, Phil, so we've got to horse through these. Southampton are talking about perhaps a switcheroo deal involving Shane Long, who might be on the move to Bournemouth. Obviously, it will be Shane Long plus a boatload of cash for Josh King. And then so long will go on loan with the option for Bournemouth to buy. He needs to get some first team football. I mean, that's the next stage of his career is like still one of the fastest players in the Premier League. So he still has juice. He just needs to get on the field and show it.
Yeah, and it looked like Hasenhüttl really was a fan of Shane Long, but he picked up a few injuries, hasn't really been able to get back into the team, and he's just fallen down the pecking order. And yeah, he's at that age where you don't want to be sitting on the bench. You want to be playing. And going to Bournemouth wouldn't be a bad move for him, because obviously they're at the top end of the championship. They play a certain way that he's going to get plenty of chances. And yeah, I think it'd be a good move for him. Obviously, Southampton get Josh King as well, and Josh King would be a good fit for them because they do create plenty of chances, Southampton. And they're looking at Billy Gilmour as well, the Chelsea midfielder, and that would be a good move for Billy Gilmour as well, because he needs game time, but he'd be playing in a team that play football in the right way.
Will he get in the team?
I think he would, yeah. I think the way Hasenhüttl plays and what he demands from his players, he'd have no problem rotating, because given the season, the nature of this season where, the physical demands on players, less time to recover. And Gilmour obviously had an injury and he's coming back. So this would be a good chance to test himself in one of the most physical demanding teams in the Premier League if Southampton were to sign him.
Shane Duffy's form obviously awful at the moment, and yet the history of Irish football is littered with players whose club form is indifferent or awful, who then get picked for the national side and play well. Think of Jason McAteer scoring for Ireland against Holland, not playing at that stage at all with any regularity, comes over, gets a bit of confidence, and then has a late flourish in his career as well. So is this something that we expect to happen for the Republic of Ireland, or can you just not pick him at the moment?
It's a tough one, because it's not going well at all. I remember when this move was meant to happen, we talked about this being a good move for Shane Duffy, and then he scored a couple of goals early in his Celtic career, and you thought, yeah, this is going well. But I think Shane Duffy's time at Celtic mirrors where Celtic are at the moment, and just being absolutely shambolic. And unfortunately for Shane Duffy, he's had a tough time off the pitch. Sometimes players need that release of football to turn things around, but it just seems to be going from bad to worse for Shane Duffy. And it's going to be a tough call for Stephen Kenny to make. I'm sure him and his coaching staff have obviously talked about Shane Duffy, what did he do, because they'll be looking at team selections for that Serbia game. And here you have a player that has zero confidence in the team he's playing at the moment, but maybe playing for Ireland is exactly what he needs. It's a huge call for Stephen Kenny. Obviously John Egan starts, so who goes in with John Egan if Shane Duffy doesn't? Kieran Clark didn't start for Newcastle at the weekend, obviously came on in the win over Everton, but I really hope Shane Duffy can turn it around. There was talk of him getting a move away from Celtic, which probably needs to happen.
Yeah, the Forest one was obviously the one that people are...
Yeah, and Chris Hughton obviously would be...
Seems to make the most sense.
Yeah.
All right, Phil, good stuff. That's today's Deal or No Deal.
I signed for them after the Euros, and after my first day's training, I was driving home. I was actually thinking, regretting it, what have I done? Like I walked into a circus.
It's amazing, isn't it? There's a full slate of midweek games in the Premier League this week that is going to have a huge impact. We've already talked a little bit about the Liverpool-Brighton game. City are playing Burnley as well, so we'll get our teeth stuck into those over the next couple of days. We're also going to have a Lions depth chart special as we head into the Six Nations. How many Irish players will actually make the Lions starting 15 as it stands at the moment? James Ryan, Tyke Furlong if he's fit. Is there anybody else at this stage who you can say, yeah, they're going to be it? Well, we'll get into that on tomorrow's show. But right now we're going to bring you the best from the weekend pay-per-view. It's Timmy McCarthy and Gráinne McElwain joining Joe Malloy. Enjoy.
A Six Nations preview in every paper, really. It's full of look-aheads to next week and beyond. Timmy, what grabbed you? Where do you want to start?
I think we should start with Peter Riley's piece about a strong start. If you think of what we're facing right now, he makes a big emphasis on a strong start. He talks about obviously Sexton and Furlong, the importance of both of them. But he also talks about the relevance for Andy Farrell of getting a good start, and that's picked up in some other papers as well. But I think a strong start is critical for any new era, because it builds confidence externally. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff going on internally. There's no doubt there's a lot of good stuff going on internally, but it's the external stuff that really ultimately, in my experience, brings down managers, particularly at professional levels. So I like this piece about, make it very clear, we need to get a good start next week against Wales. But what I was concerned about is the importance that he placed on Sexton and Furlong, because Sexton is struggling with an injury, and Furlong, as you mentioned at the start, Joe, is just coming back after being out for a long period of time, and he came back in a Pro 12 or Pro 14 game, so it's not the same as stepping up to international. So that would concern me, but I just thought his piece nailed it. We need a strong start.
Yeah, we sure do. It's Wales first away, and then it's France in Dublin. Last time we played Wales away was 25-7 in Wales' favour. They won the Grand Slam in the rain. That was the day Ireland elected not to close the roof. It was Joe Schmidt's last Six Nations, and it was a miserable afternoon. Now, Wales are not in the place they were then, to say the least. So Peter O'Reilly makes the point. It has been suggested, and not entirely in jest, that the winning team could be the one whose players most enjoy each other's company. And given the COVID situation, I mean, even the Irish players are embarking on an 18-day bubble initially before they'll see any family or friends at the moment. So, he makes the point, well before COVID, one of Andy Farrell's main preoccupations was making the atmosphere in the camp more enjoyable and less fearful than it had become under Joe Schmidt. This becomes even more important now, and I suspect it does. Both Neil Francis and Peter O'Reilly touch on the importance of Sexton, Sexton is the picture in Peter O'Reilly's piece. Neil Francis' piece says everything rests on Sexton's shoulders. There's an interesting statistic in Peter O'Reilly's piece, because we often go into Six Nations worrying about Johnny Sexton's health, for sure, and not least as he's got older. But he says, in the past 7 tournaments, Sexton has failed to just start 3 games. So he's played 32 of 35, and 2 of those he missed were against Italy. So in effect, they don't really count. So basically, he's pretty much played every single game of started every single game of the Six Nations Championship over the last 7 seasons, bar one. Neil Francis basically makes the point of Sexton as well, that I can say with a reasonable degree of confidence, Ireland would have won nothing in the last 10 years if Sexton had not been around, which is a bold enough statement. So no pressure on Johnny there, Grania.
No, and that actually struck my eye as well, because this is the narrative that we actually kind of hear and see. And I mean, in terms of starting games, yes, but in terms of finishing games, I suppose in the latter time, he has come off a lot earlier than we all would have liked to have seen that happen. So that's another stat. But that was interesting in the Neil Francis piece as well, was that the comparisons with Tom Brady, and I'm sure Johnny Sexton at this stage is sick of ever doing an interview, because everyone's just talking about Tom Brady and what he wants to do to emulate Tom Brady and continue playing when he's 43. But it's the amount of hits, the amount of injuries. Like, Tom Brady hasn't put his body through the same amount of hits and attrition that Johnny Sexton has done as well. And I think that's the key thing for Johnny Sexton. Like, can his body hold up? And we don't know. And Peter has said, obviously, that he started those games, but, he's 35, 30. Well, can he maintain that level of physicality? Because we just know how difficult these games are going to be, and how important it is for Ireland to get off to that good start. But another thing that struck me as well about that is, it's kind of when we're talking about this inexperience and these pressure on players. We spoke about Stephen Kenny, but now, they're talking as well now about Andy Farrell, and, there's going to be questions about him, questions about David Nikifor as well. And that comes up in Peter O'Reilly's piece as well, as in what are we going to see from them? And possibly for the first time now, if this doesn't go well for David Nikifor now, in first time in 7 years, there's going to be serious questions being asked about him and the team that has been put together as well. And Paul O'Connell too, everybody's talking about what a great position and getting him in as a forwards coach, and it is, of course, but he has relatively little inexperience as well. So it's kind of very similar. We're expecting so much from him because he was such an amazing player. But as we've seen in other players and that have come in and passed, it doesn't necessarily negate that you'll be brilliant at coaching and management. And this is his first year being involved. So it's going to be interesting to see the effect that he's going to have on this as well. So there's a lot of bedding in period. It's been such a difficult time for all managements and players in this COVID pandemic. They're not getting the same run of games and get-togethers that they would have had in previous years. So I think there's a lot at stake, obviously, in how Ireland play, but also in terms of that management setup and coaching setup, how they perform as well. Yeah, and both those pieces, Peter O'Reilly's and Neil Francis's, make those points. Like Peter makes the point, Ireland do have a sympathetic schedule.
in terms of Wales first off, they're in dire form. And then he says France arrive on Sunday without their first choice out half in Roman Ntamak. None of their team has won a Six Nations game at the Aviva Stadium. When you put it like that, he says, suddenly that slam decider against England does not sound so fanciful. And yet, and you suspected there was an and yet coming. Do we really think of this Ireland side as title contenders? Not if you use the evidence of 2020. The building blocks of their game wobbled too often, and you sensed a coaching team still feeling its way at top level. He goes on to say later on, Peter O'Reilly, that Simon Easterby is yet to prove himself as a top-class defence coach. Mike Catt has not exactly revolutionised Ireland's attacking game, and against an aggressive rush defence of the type employed by England and France, Ireland have been woefully short on solutions. Neil Francis cuts to the core a bit more. He says, Farrell's first year as head coach, less than impressive. Strategically, I wasn't sure what the coaching ticket were trying to do. And then he just makes the comparison with the current coaching ticket versus the old one. So he said, Andy Farrell's not as good as Joe Schmidt. Simon Easterby is not as good as Andy Farrell when it comes to defence. John Fogarty is not as good as Greg Feek. Mike Catt is not as good as Stuart Lancaster or Stephen Larkham. The only unquantifiable is how good is Paul O'Connell. He goes on to say, if Farrell has Sexton and Furlong in his team, he has a chance of having a decent season. Decent season according to Peter O'Reilly then, Timmy. What constitutes a successful Six Nations for Farrell and Musafora? It involves beating, Peter O'Reilly's verdict is it involves beating the three teams ranked below Ireland, Scotland, Wales and Italy, to remain on the mezzanine level below France and England. If Ireland could go one better and beat one of the big two, this would constitute a corner turn. So that's about where they are. Best of the rest.
Yeah, I disagree with that. I disagree with that. Yeah, I do. I strongly disagree with that because.
So, who do you? So England and he's saying England and France are the best, and Ireland are best of the rest. No.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is that this Irish team, if you take the nucleus of this Irish team, 2 years ago we were talking about winning a World Cup. If you just think about going into that World Cup, you're talking about winning a World Cup, right? So we haven't become so bad overnight. Now, obviously, some players have got a bit older, but then players like James Ryan have really stepped up. So I really believe that if we get this right, we have a real chance in the Six Nations. The big question is, can we get it right? And I just think that if you take Neil Francis' piece. And the Sexton comparison for us with people like Tom Brady, and he mentioned LeBron James, who just signed a $153 million contract. I don't think that's a fair comparison because, there's no evidence of rugby players in their late 30s able to perform at the peak, and definitely in their 40s. So there's no evidence of that. There is experience in the NBA and the NFL of players, particularly people like Brady's position and LeBron going on longer. So there's more longevity. So that's the first thing about the comparison, with Sexton. Sexton's at 36, and there's no doubt that there's a question mark about his ability to be at the peak for long periods. So we've got to protect Sexton, I believe, through this. So I thought the piece, or the stat about the fact 32 to 35 games was a fascinating stat. Secondly,
could I ask you a question?
Yep.
How, in God's name, do you protect Johnny Sexton in rugby? There's no protecting him.
You play him less, but you play him less.
Okay, so he has to play. He has to play against Wales away. He has to start against France at home. Sure, that's good luck.
Okay, but no, what I'm saying is, but Joe, you can. You just don't play him as long. You just don't play him as long in the game. He has to start. If he's fit, he has to start as the first team, right? Okay. So what you do is you make sure he doesn't play for Leinster. You take all those things. If you want to protect somebody at 36 years of age who has the battle wounds that Johnny Sexton's had, who has the talent that he has, and Neil Francis' point is that Ireland wouldn't have been as successful without Sexton. There's no doubt that that's a very true statement.
But Timmy, just to interrupt you, sorry, he's the best managed player in the country because of his value. So if you look at 2021 and late 2020, Sexton effectively has played no rugby. He trained brilliantly by all accounts at Leinster, and then in the first game he was thrown into, which was Leinster-Munster the other week, he gets a muscle injury because of his age. I'm not really sure how you protect him, to be honest. You're either playing or you're not.
No, but that's the question, Joe. If he's not up to it, we shouldn't be playing him. I mean, let's be very clear. If he's not up to it, but if he is playing, what I'm saying is, you play him less. You even in the game against Wales, you don't play. We play him normally for 60 to 65 minutes. I'm not sure in his current state of physicality that's capable for him. So you play him for less time, okay? So that's one thing. You protect him as best you can, and obviously, Joe, in rugby, the protection is more limited than we say in NFL.
And so,
the other point,
so say you're 15 points apiece with Wales in Cardiff after 55 minutes.
I'd take him out.
Yeah, well, I mean,
but Joe,
I'm not sure you would. I'm not sure you would. Honestly, I'm not sure you would. You have to win that game.
Okay, but Joe, but first of all, as a former coach of club and country, I would take him out. If that's my plan, I would take him out.
Okay, because you have to. You massively risk losing that game then.
Because here's the key, for me as a coach, right? For me as a coach, here it's my philosophy that this is how I coach. This is how I put my team out, and I've got to have the courage, Joe, as the coach, and that's the big thing that I would question in many of the coaches. I've got to have the courage to stay with my conviction. And so I'll give you a good example. When I was coaching Tralee, the best player we had, the best Irish player, was a guy called John Tehan. And we played our first game against Neptune in the league with great expectations, and we got walloped. We got absolutely walloped. So our next big game was the following week was at home against St. Vincent's Dublin, who Tralee had never beaten. And John Tehan picked up an injury during the week. And we did a fitness test. Now, John Tehan will go through a wall for you, a bit like Johnny Sexton. And we had a fitness test with John Tehan. And I said to John, if you don't pass the fitness test, you are not playing. No, at that time, my job was on the line, the pressure and all that. No, he passed the test, Joe. But I told John Tehan, if he didn't pass it, he wouldn't have played. Because you have to have a conviction. So I'm telling you, if I was the coach of the Irish team, and with 50 in all, with 25 minutes to go, and my plan was to say Sexton out to protect him for the next week and the other games, I would take Sexton out.
Yeah, maybe. Look, I mean, each to their own. Very difficult. If John Tehan gives you the thumbs up and says, I'm feeling great and I'm playing well and 55 minutes are on the clock, leave me on here.
I did it, Joe, as a player in a cup final.
No, I believe you. No. I don't doubt you, but I just think this is a different situation, really. This isn't, somebody with a specific injury and they have to pass a fitness test. This is just somebody who's battling age a little bit. Like, there's every chance. Like, the week before the Munster game, actually, I think Sexton played 80 minutes, didn't he, at the RDS?
Yeah, he did.
Of 80 minutes.
He did.
Yeah. So he does have 80 minutes in him at times, and, you lose to Wales.
It's not the same thing, though, Joe. With respect, 80 minutes in the Pro 14, with respect, is not the same as a game against Wales and Cardiff. Like, it is a step up. I mean, even though it
might be a step up, but he still picked up a niggle against Munster at Thomond Park. Like, if you're running, you're running. Neil Francis makes the point. Quite often he picks up a niggle just as a result of extending himself. Like, if you're sprinting, you're sprinting. I don't know. I just think it's a really difficult thing to put on a coach to say you need to protect. How can you say to Danny Farrell, you need to protect Sexton? I mean, it's just so hard to predict when someone's going to get injured.
But can I just develop one point? I do not agree with Francis's headline. I absolutely don't agree with that.
Well, it's not his headline, but I
know I say so better, so I understand that, but I'm saying the headline of his piece.
Yeah.
I don't agree with that. I don't believe that our entire, I think at one point in time in Sexton's career it was critical, but I do believe that in a team game, it can't be just down to one person, irrespective of the talent that he has.
Yeah.
So to finish the point then, Joe, you asked me about where we finish. I really believe that if we perform, because it's about performing, that's all. If we perform, we'll be in the shake-up for the championship at the end of this.
I hope you're right. The headline, by the way, on Neil Francis' piece is "Everything rests on Sexton's shoulders." But sorry, Grania, you were coming in.
No, sorry, the delay here. Just to come in as well on Shane McGrath had on his article, like clouds hang over middling Ireland, and this is about Andy Farrell. But a point that I highlighted here was, the Farrell era has been characterised by caution. His most important player remains Johnny Sexton, who will be 36 in the summer, and whose best days are behind him, according to Shane McGrath. That tends to be the way with rugby players in their mid-30s. But he talks then about the alternatives to the number 10s, like from the fitness difficulties of Joey Carberry to the impressions made by Ross Byrne and Billy Burns when they have been given a chance. But it would help, though, if form were at least acknowledged. The best performance by an Irish out-half in months was provided by Jack Carty in Connacht's victory over Leinster at the RDS, but he remains on the outside, though with Farrell's selections defended on the basis of the decision-making of Carty, as Connacht tried and failed to get a late try in defeat by Munster a week later. So that's kind of one of the things that stood out to me about that article as well. And also, I suppose, frustrations was another one too. I think that was a Shane McGrath piece here. Yeah, it was by Hugh Farrell. It was a common piece as well, which was frustration bubbles under as squad leaves sour taste. And I thought it was a really well written article. It was about kind of how you need to bite your tongue at times. And he looks at, like, horse racing champion, Cheltenham Festival. He looks at the GAA managers as well and talks in terms of 3-year deals and some managers getting paid for it. And then he talks about rugby as well, as it shares bite the tongue scenarios, beginning with the quality of its product itself. But one of the big things he's talking about here is he talks about here that while the arguably rugby's biggest problem, the tongue-biting issue that intrigues most is national jerseys becoming a parody of what they are supposed to represent amid the continuing blight of imported players suppressing homegrown talent. And he's talking about Irish talent suffers while overseas journeymen maximise career dividends. And he gives the example of Jamison Gibson Park. Nothing against him, but he's in the Ireland Six Nations squad ahead of Luke McGrath and especially John Cooney, which is mind-boggling. So John Cooney is coming up again in this article as why he is not involved in the Irish side. And he also mentions Stuart McCluskey too, as an Ulster centre, who has only 4 caps over 5 years. Is very hard to justify. And how many more would McCluskey have next to his name were it not for Bundy Aki? So that's one of the themes as well of I suppose Jack Carty not getting on, John Cooney not getting involved in the squad too. That kind of caught my eye as well.
And what are your thoughts on that, Grania? Do you agree with the point?
It's kind of we're having this issue in GA, and I've been listening to the future of sport as well, as where you need to have players playing and being involved, and regardless of your talent, like if there's a player pathway, if people aren't involved in sport, they're going to leave out and not get involved. So, you want the Bundy Akis involved and the Jamison Gibson Parks because they are brilliant rugby players and they have been brought here and they've shown that for their club how brilliant that they are. But yet you have players that are from Ireland that have gone through the underage setups here who cannot get on the side. So personally, for me, I don't think that's fair. And I totally agree with the rule now that the 3-year rule I thought was very unfair. You have a 5-year rule now, which means you obviously have to stay here and get involved. And I do see the other side of the argument where you're now living here, you've set up your base here as a home, and if you spend 5 years to work in an Irish team, that's much better. But I do feel very sorry for the likes of John Cooney because he plays so well for Ulster, and it's like, what else does he have to do to put his hand up and get involved in this squad? And what are the reasons that he's not actually being brought on? Is it because there's something that the management don't see in him for potential, which he does for his province but doesn't do for the country? Does he need to be given more time? What is it about him that he can't get on? And Jack Carty, I know, has had chances, but does he deserve another chance being involved? So I am a bit torn on this, I must say. I do feel desperately sorry for players that have come up through the ranks and that have been involved in this and are not getting a chance because other players have come in. I think it's better now for 5 years because it obviously means that they're here for a reason. The 3-year rule I thought was terrible. I just thought it was very, very unfair to Irish players that have been, and any player that's been gone through the under academy and player academy all the time. So I do think it's unfair.
Like Timmy, Hugh seems to be sort of making the point here when it's a close enough call, a la Jamison Gibson Park versus Cooney or Luke McGrath, that the Irish player should get the nod.
So I don't agree with that. I believe you picked the best player available to you. I have question marks about this residency situation of 3 years and even 5 years. I do have a question mark about that in essence. But if they do qualify, then you just pick your best players. And obviously Andy Farrell is picking his best players. So I would disagree with Groin the fact that if you serve underage at international level, that you're entitled because of that to get in front of somebody who now qualifies under the residency rule. But I do have great sympathy for people, who are Irish born and bred, and that players can come over. I mean, basically mercenaries in some ways you can call them, can come over to a country, spend 3 years as it was originally and 5 years as it was. Some of them stay, but they don't all stay. Other people go back, and they can use that to their own professional advantage, which is their right to do. So I do have a concern about that aspect of it, of the real desire to play for Ireland as regards the desire to play international from a professional contract point of view. But I do believe that if you're Farrell, you want to pick your best players. And that's why, Groyan made a very good point earlier about Jack Carty. I mean, he has had an exceptionally good season, particularly in the game against Leinster. And he's completely gone off Andy Farrell's radar. So, we'll all have opinions who should be picked. Ultimately, it comes down to Farrell, who he wants to pick, and the structure he wants to play in that sense. But as regards the the point of view, Farley, is that there is huge frustration. You know, I mean, I was fortunate enough to play for my country, and you know, if I was playing for my country, when I played, what happened was if you had an American at the time who was to qualify, he would have to have a grandparent rule. There was a grandparent rule. You had to have an association with Ireland. In rugby, that doesn't matter. You can be associated with anywhere, and you can just be in a country for 3, or now as it is 5 years, and qualify for the country. So I have no issue with Andy Farrell picking who he wants to pick because they're qualified, and he picks them on his basis. But I do understand fully that if you're Cooney or the other guys, the frustration must be to see, with respect, you know, like, you know, guys coming who are really not good enough to make it in their own country, and now we're taking the spot where you could have at, you know, scrum half, and the frustration that would be. But if they're qualified, Joe, they're qualified, and that's the rules of the game.
Okay. Mike Brown, by the way, beside that, has a pretty good piece. We don't have to dwell on it, but it's very decent. He gives a nice insight into Eddie Jones. Just talks about how innovative he is all the time, how after meeting Pep Guardiola and seeing how in amongst training Pep got, that Eddie started doing that as well. He'd get so involved with sessions, you'd see him getting smashed out of rucks by guys 3 times his size. Or, you know, in team meetings, he has a tennis ball at all times and he'll just fire it at people and shout catch to make sure everyone's paying attention at all times. Or when they were about to play South Africa, he had, on the walk from the ground, from the dressing room to the training pitch, music blaring and all the staff wearing Springbok kits and shouting abuse at them in Afrikaans to try and get them in the mood. From an Irish rugby point of view, just a nice little reality check for us. Mike Brown picks his Lions 15. Number of Irish players in his Lions 15, 1. James Ryan. Otherwise, it's we're 0 for the other 14 when it comes to Irish players in Mike Brown's Lions 15. On James Ryan, by the way, Stuart Barnes makes the point in the Sunday Times. He's talking about players he's watching this year, and he talks about, you know, he's looked great at doing the basics and all the rest. But he says, however, he has looked lightweight on the last couple of occasions against England. The much debated battle of the locks, Ryan against Itoje, has never materialised. He must find a new level of physicality against England. So sometimes the outside views in can be a bit more chastening. Just before we leave the Six Nations then, it's everywhere. We won't get through all the previews. This is most likely the last free-to-air Six Nations. Brendan Fanning's writing about that in the Sunday Independent on page 5. And, you know, he's charting various aspects of the situation, the attempts in 03 and then Eamon Ryan's in 10 to get the Six Nations onto the A list, and how the RFU have generally campaigned against that, and they want it on the B list. They feel they'd be going into negotiations with one hand tied behind their backs if it was on the protected list. And so it seems like, I guess, a perfect storm of COVID and CVC coming in and Irish legislation not being where rugby fans might want it to be. Like in France, the Six Nations is protected, for instance. And it looks like this is going to happen. So the worry is, I suppose, Grania, what does it mean for the sport? Heineken Cup went behind paywall and survived just fine. I don't think the Heineken Champions Cup as it is now is in as good a place. So the Six Nations is almost like the crown jewels, really, and one of the great advertisements for the game. And so if that disappears from a million eyeballs in this country, it'll be a decade or more before we understand the consequences.
Yeah, I think it's important to have elements of your sport on free to air. I really do. And the reason it is, it's visibility. You have to be able to visibly see this. Now, I do think the whole COVID pandemic has changed how we view sport. You know, we've got much more into streaming. It's become a lot more acceptable to pay your €5 or your €10 to watch a particular match, which we've done for a lot of GA games, which beforehand people would not have been happy to do that. So I think we have become a bit more acceptable and willing to do paying for actual sport that we can watch on a live stream. But it's interesting in the same article as well, Brendan Fanning, like he just talks about the restricting the view, for example, the 20 by 20 movement to promote women in sport in this country use the "if she can't see it, she can't be it" slogan to make the point visibility is key. This observation was made repeatedly to the then ERC Chief Executive Derek McGrath back in the 03-04 season when he was taking the Heineken Cup from free to air to satellite in the shape of Sky. Never mind the natives first he had to cam the sponsor. So it's like I can see where they are, because rugby is in a very perilous situation in terms of finance. So in one way that their hands are very much tied as well, because they need the money. And when they're going for that negotiation, everyone's aware around the table that they need this money to actually can keep the professional game afloat here in Ireland. But if you don't see it, if young people don't see the sport actually on television, does it become irrelevant? I mean, for a long time, golf, you couldn't see golf in free to air. Like, you have to have subscriptions to see golf. We've seen an upsurge in golf course now because of the pandemic. So I'm not sure if it's a great idea to have every part of your aspect on behind the paywall. I think you need to have a visibility on that. And I'm not sure in Ireland if they'll allow that to happen, the Six Nations to go and be paid, Joe. I'm not sure if the government will allow that to take place. So we will see what the result of that will be.
Yeah, Eamon Ryan was certainly shouted down in 2010 when he tried to look at putting it on the A list, and the RFU were first at his door to say, "Do not do this. Like, we need to keep the broadcasters honest." I think it is under review at the moment. Catherine Martin is looking at it. Paul Rouse had a very good piece a couple of weeks ago. We discussed it on the show, and he outlined the incredible fall-off in viewing figures when you go from free-to-air to pay-per-view, which won't surprise anyone. And in certain demographics, it's especially huge. Like in rural Ireland in particular, the drop-off is absolutely enormous. And he posed the question to me. He said, why is rugby being treated so differently to Irish football, i.e. the Republic of Ireland matches are all protected, and to GAA, again, effectively all protected, all the marquee games? And he said, why is rugby different here? It seems in part because of rugby's own lobbying.
It does seem in part because of rugby's lobbying. I also think Gráinne's point is very, very valid. If you can't see it, it's very hard to get into it. And, you know, like Paul's piece a few weeks ago about the drop-off was staggering when you actually see it and in front of you. It was actually staggering that the drop-off was so intense. It really was. It was, you know, off a cliff edge. So I do believe that if from a rugby point of view, the RFU want money. So, you know, they're a professional organisation and they're looking to get money. So that's their agenda. So, you know, I'm not sure that they at the higher echelons in a professional sense have a real concern about it being lost to free-to-air. I'd have a real concern, because I think that when you lose free-to-air, you lose the commonality, the community spirit that we talk about when pre-COVID and, please God, post-COVID, we meet up and chat about things in that sense, because not everybody is going to, as Paul Rouse highlighted, is going to watch it if you have to pay for it. So I think it's a real challenge ahead now, and I would love the government to come out and protect it.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made